Welcome to another exciting episode of the Collect and Destroy podcast. I am your host, the Baxter of Puppets. The year is 1981, and the world has no idea what type of fury is about to be unleashed upon it. In the San Francisco Bay Area, thrash metal is being born, with bands like Metallica and Exodus leading the charge. But in New York City, another heavy metal legend, a group of guys calling themselves Anthrax, has just been launched. This band's double bass drumming and complex guitar stylings of the new wave of British heavy metal, combined with the speed and aggression of New York hardcore, is the reason we are here today. My guest today is one of my longtime brothers in metal, obsessing over everything from 80s glam to thrash metal. He doesn't like crustaceans, but you can find him under the sea. Nasty Nate Fehlauer, welcome to the show.
Hey, Baxter, it is absolutely fabulous to see you this evening. Yeah, definitely. I'm just chilling down here in Florida under the sea. And I also want to say happy Earth Day to you. I picture you out maybe planting some trees earlier.
Yeah, I got a little bit of sun today, out planting trees, frolicking with the woodland creatures.
Yeah, kind of like a Johnny Appleseed. I kind of just picture you like with a little sack of seeds, kind of whistling.
I do wear like a tin pot on my head a lot.
Okay. I was picturing like a beaver tail hat.
So what's new? I heard you're venturing into the world of scuba diving.
Yeah, that's kind of my next future hobby here. I'm only in the online learning stage. I'm going to jump in the pool probably next week, I think, with the tank and the regulator and all that and the mask and just generally kind of look like a James Bond action hero.
Yeah, I figured dodging harpoons, battling people.
Yep. Yeah, cutting the line on the air, shooting people with harpoons, all that. So I'm pretty excited about that. I mean, it's a little scary, being under the ocean and all that, but I think it's going to be pretty amazing as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, something to do, I'm in Florida, so.
Yeah, I was going to say the land of Mel Fisher and such.
Yes, exactly. Lots of treasure. I mean, I'm on the Treasure Coast, they call it down here. So
sure, yeah.
That's a good sign for possibly finding some doubloons down there.
So what else you been up to? What you been watching? Anything? Reading anything?
Yeah, I've been kind of doing a little bit of both. I finished a book. It was called The Wolf and the Watchman. It was pretty interesting. About like 18th century Sweden. And it's kind of like it's kind of a creepy thriller, really. It's pretty dark. It starts out with this watchman is like a police guy, and he like finds this body floating in this bog, and it's got like no limbs at all, and like the eyes are cut out. It's pretty uplifting.
Sounds like it.
And it and then it gets darker from there, But that was okay. And then I don't know, TV, I don't know, nothing really good. I watched a little Marvel stuff here and there, but I'm not super into that, I wouldn't say.
I feel like Falcon and Winter Soldier has gotten a lot better. I think it had a very slow start, and I think it's picking up. It's kind of weird because I think that like Mandalorian set such a high bar for the Disney content, and then WandaVision came out, and that was pretty high, but not as high as Mandalorian. And now I think Falcon and Winter Soldier is like right below that. So hopefully that's just a temporary thing. But I think that you pick up so much more by doing like these long series that basically like teach you about all these characters that you'd know nothing about with the movies. They can't tell that in a 2-hour story.
Yep. Yeah, I was never really interested in like either of those characters, but it's cool to see them. Like I like them more having watched this show. So I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I was just saying that the other day. I was not a Bucky Barnes fan, and now I am. Now I'm like, oh, this guy's awesome. Like, but I just never got into it. I didn't get into the Winter Soldier character. But they kind of have like a buddy cop thing going on that show too. Like,
yep. And we got what's his name? Kurt Russell's son.
Yes.
What's his name? I forgot.
Wyatt.
I was gonna say Wiley, but yeah, Wyatt. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. I know we both recently, in preparation for this podcast, watched the documentary "Murder in the Front Row," which
Yeah.
pretty awesome. Can you kind of fill in our listeners what that movie was about?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, it's about the San Francisco thrash scene in the early '80s. I mean, it's all about people leaving LA, trying to get away from the glam scene and heading up the road up to San Francisco. And I mean, it's just where so many bands like just made it big there. And it was all about like the community of all the bands, doing shows at all these famous venues. I can't remember the name of
Ruthie's.
Ruthie's, yeah. So yeah, it's kind of like the camaraderie and the rise of these bands out there.
Yeah, it
And
was
of
like
course,
all
lots
for
of good
one and
bands
one
and
for
good
all.
music.
I very much compared like the early thrash scene to like the hardcore scene that I came out of, where it really is like you said, this like family mentality, and it's like you're either
Hmm.
with us or you're against us. And
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like that too. People stumble into the hardcore shows and they don't really know what's going on. They're kind of observing. Maybe they're wearing the wrong shirt because they're just trying to fit in. And then eventually they kind of like join that family, and it uh, it's just like a really cool thing to see. But when it comes to like thrash bands, you only know like as much as having listened to them our whole lives and seeing them at that huge level of success. But this documentary really showed that like all of these huge bands came out of this small little community playing this very small bar run by like a jazz musician, right? Or
Yeah,
blues.
I think so. Yeah.
Just him giving them the opportunity to have that community at their venue was in itself just goes to show that you get support from unseen
Exactly. Yeah.
situations.
Yeah. Great. Great. I don't know if you call it interviews, but segments with a lot of the stars from all those bands. I mean, you can't read this right here, but it's like a list of all the people that appear in it.
Yep.
You know, and I learned a lot more about Exodus. I didn't know that much about Exodus, but they were heavily featured in this, which was
Yeah,
actually
absolutely. I
pretty
I actually have
informative.
before the movie came out, there was a book from years ago, and Murder in the Front Row was a hardcover book of all just photographs. So it was like a photograph book, like a coffee table book
Oh yeah,
of all photos of this scene, early days of Slayer with their eyeliner before they were told to throw that away. You don't need the eyeliner.
that's right. Yeah.
And so it was cool to finally get a chance to check out the documentary. So highly recommend that. Um, you've been, we're still quarantining it here. The pandemic is, there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but there's been a lot of like live concerts. You've been checking anything out in regards to like live streams or anything like that?
Yeah, not really. I haven't really been paying attention enough. I mean, I should be. Yeah. The only thing that was like similar to that was I watched there was a big Alice in Chains. What was it called? I don't even remember, but it was like all
Oh,
these
at the
artists like
Mopop.
covering. What was it?
Mopop. It's the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle.
In Seattle, yeah. So it had all these bands, like a lot of them Seattle bands and such, and covering Alice in Chains songs. It was really actually pretty, as far as those types of shows, I thought it was like really high end, like really great performances by everybody.
Yeah, I
You
liked
know,
how they set up in like different parts of the museum.
yeah. I think
It-
that one is that just on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it was like I don't
yeah, I
remember if
think
I
you can
had it.
replay it for free on YouTube.
I think so. Yeah, I
I've
definitely
been
recommend that.
catching a fairly large amount of live streams. Well, I shouldn't say a large amount, a couple a month, like maybe two a month. But the honestly the best one that I saw this year was the Phil Anselmo and the Illegals, the Vulgar Display of Pantera show. Um, just really, really pulled on the heartstrings as a Pantera fan to see these
Hmm.
songs played at such a high level in this kind of environment. And it's not exactly something I can explain. It's more of just like experience it, fire it up, watch it, check it out. But hearing all those songs, like those songs deserve to be played. So, and
Yep.
Phil's sounding pretty good, surprisingly, because I know he's struggled a bit with like blowing out his voice.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember you texted me as you were watching it. And you were like, "Hey, are you watching this?" And I was like, "Oh, how come you didn't tell me like 3 days ago when I when I was planning for the day?" So thanks for that.
Uh,
But yeah, next time maybe give me like a little warning.
Maybe we'll see.
Yeah,
Another one that
or
I
not.
caught was recently. I caught Pussifer, which is Maynard from Tool's, basically his solo band. He did a live stream of their Money Shot album, which also was a tour that he had taken out on the road with like luchadors and stuff. So you have like Mexican wrestlers
Oh, that's cool.
performing in and out of the songs, and there's like a whole story. Well, they made basically a theatrical version that was performed live, um, and that was really cool. I had seen a different one by Pussifer earlier, a few months ago, and this one I kind of felt kind of blew that one out of the water. That one had more to do with aliens. This one's more about luchadors. So, but let's get down to business. So today's podcast, we're here to talk about Anthrax. Anthrax is an American heavy metal band from New York City, formed in 1981 by rhythm guitarist Scott Ian and bassist Danny Lilker. The group is considered one of the leaders of the thrash metal scene from the 1980s and is part of the big four of the genre, along with Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer. It is important to note that they were also one of the first thrash metal bands, along with Overkill and Nuclear Assault, to merge from the East Coast. The band has released 11 studio albums, several other albums, and 26 singles, including collaborating on a single with legendary hip-hop group Public Enemy. Anthrax's lineup has changed numerous times over their career, leaving Scott Ian as the only constant member of the band throughout the band's history. So, with all that being said, Nate, when did you first start listening to Anthrax? What are your earliest memories of the band, and like, kind of what kind of impression did the band have on you the first time you heard them?
Well, I was actually a kid, and a teenager in the 80s. So I kind of remember, as these albums were coming out, I was kind of friends with a lot of different people in high school and stuff, like from, like the jocks and the athletes all the way to like, the long haired dudes that were listening to this kind of shit. So it was like, I got a full range of a lot of different options and people showing me new music. So I think it was definitely like, one of those times in high school where you're just hanging out and people would like pass around tapes, check out cassette tapes or whatever. And of course I was seeing them a bunch on MTV, and that like really pulled me in. I think, when you see these guys and how much fun they have and the energy they have, like them just jumping around the stage. I mean, Scott Ian kicking his legs up and, they're jumping it, they're just kind of goofy on camera, which was like a lot different than a lot of the bands trying to look
Yeah,
either like super tough or, like the glam stuff, looking like women. These guys were kind of something else. I mean, wearing shorts, like, these crazy colored shorts or just regular t-shirts, pretty much just whatever they were wearing for the day. I mean, they're wearing in the videos and on stage. So I think it was that image along with the music that really drew me to these guys. And one album that we really like totally basically got melted our CD by playing it so much was Attack of the Killer Bees, which, as you know, is a compilation album, as you call it.
yeah,
So you don't even consider it like a real album. But we, me and my friends, we used to play the hell out of that thing. Cause I think it's like it's like a great like cross section of what Anthrax really is. I mean, it's like you have the energized live performances on there. And then you also have kind of their silly side, starting up a posse, the what do they call it? The NFB, basically spelled backwards, Nice Fucking Ballad, where they make fun of all the like power ballads that were coming out at the time.
yeah,
Of course, you got the Public Enemy, Bring the Noise appears on there, like one of their most famous hits that kind of crossed over to fans of rap and metal. And also their like goofy little rap, I'm the Man, was on there, after the earlier EP that was the only place you could find that. And then there's a bunch of cover songs on there, and it shows off their side projects. It shows off like the bands they love. Like there's a Kiss cover on there.
yeah.
So it was just a fun album just to throw on in the car. It was like almost like a sweet mixtape in itself. I just really, we just really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think our mutual friend Justin, I think he had that at Hartman Design, where we used to work together. And I remember that being in rotation a lot, this album. I think for me, about the time that I discovered heavy metal is when I discovered Anthrax, because they kind of go hand in hand. You got that logo, you got that, it's just kind of one of those things when you get into certain genres of music, us certain bands are the ones that you gravitate towards because they're so well known and recognized. So for me, it was interesting because around the time that I would have discovered Anthrax, John Bush was the singer of Anthrax. So there's this legendary band. I'm listening to these early albums. I'm not really into the John Bush era Anthrax, but I know this is like a legendary band. So it's not something that I'm probably going to go see. You got an album like Attack of the Killer Bees, which is like a really big mix of sound. It's not exactly like a thrash album so much. But I was definitely too young for the original run of the classic lineup, the Joey Belladonna era Anthrax. So I think my interest in the band probably peaked around 2005 when they reunited with the original lineup. And they're going to reunite with Joey and Danny. They're going out on tour with Judas Priest, who just reunited with Rob Halford. So they're putting out the Angel Retribution album. So it's the Retribution tour. I have the opportunity to see two bands. I'd seen Judas Priest before, but not with Rob Halford singing. And both of these bands, you want to see the singer. So Rob Halford is the singer, obviously, of Judas Priest. Bruce Dickinson, the singer of Iron Maiden. Joey Belladonna, the singer of Anthrax. So pretty good opportunity to go and check them out. And I would also like to mention, I think anyone that's my age is familiar with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. And Bring the Noise was a staple of playing this video game. You heard this song for hours on end. You're trying to beat the level. And what a great way to kick off video game skateboarding on the original PlayStation. That sound, ladies and gentlemen, means it's time for the ranking. Nate and I will be ranking our top 5 Anthrax studio albums. We'll go through our lists, 5 through 1, my list, your list, and then we will compare the lists, discuss through them, debate. Are you ready?
I can hardly wait. Let's see it here.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
So at number 5, I have Worship Music. Number 4, Fistful of Metal. Number 3, 1988, State of Euphoria. Number 2, Spreading the Disease. And my number 1 pick is Among the Living. And on your list, Nate, we have 1984, Spreading the Disease. 1988, State of Euphoria. Sound of White Noise featuring John Bush. Persistence of Time at number 2. And your number 1 pick is also Among the Living.
I'm shocked.
So, Nate, why don't you kick us off with your number 1 pick, Among the Living from 1987?
Among the Living is the classic lineup, as you said, with, Joey and Dan Spitz and Scott Ian, Frank Bello, who am I missing? Charlie Benanti. So it's like the full lineup. And you could tell on this record that they were feeling the power that they were creating, and they were rising, in the ranks. This being the second one, I think the first one, they were kind of Spreading the Disease. They were kind of getting used to working with each other. But I think you could just tell by how they performed in the studio, pretty much like a live setting in the studio too, with I think it was Eddie Kramer. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep, Eddie Kramer.
Who had worked with Hendrix and Zeppelin and Kiss previously on, especially Kiss Alive. So the boys loved that live sound, and pretty much Eddie Kramer gave them the energy by having them perform pretty much in the same room and basically like a live setup. The the other thing with this album, I think it really shows that Anthrax that's willing to have the lyrical content that's very unique and sort of a lot of diversity within it. As far as like the literary references they use, there's a lot of Stephen King in their work. And this one has some. They got the silly and fun side as well. And then they also have the social concerns, and they're not afraid to like show some personal emotion. Of course, Among the Living, the overall theme is based on The Stand by Stephen King.
Yep.
So there's that. And then Skeletons in the Closet is based on Apt Pupil. There's funny stuff like Caught in a Mosh. You got the story behind that, I think, coming up.
Yeah, we'll dig into that a little bit later.
And then they're talking about, there's Indians on there, another super awesome hit, talking about the plight of the Native Americans. And they kind of close it off with ADI, Horror of It All, as a tribute to Cliff Burton, who had passed away recently right before this. So I just love like the diversity of everything. Of course, it's just heavy guitars, and it's the blast beats on the drums. I mean, I think it's just Anthrax at their peak right here.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think this is a very popular pick for the number one Anthrax album, so kind of not surprised that we both picked it. It's a perfect album from start to finish. It's got the best songwriting. It's got the best flow. It's got the best production, which they kind of had to fight for that production, and we'll get into that a little bit later. I would argue that Caught in a Mosh and Indians are two of the greatest heavy metal songs of all time. Like, if there's a list of the 100 best heavy metal songs, those songs are, to me, are definitely on that list.
Right. Yep, for sure.
Those are staples of their concert too. Like, you can't go and see these bands without hearing those two songs. Among the Living, the title track, it's just straight fire out of the gates. Like, what a great way to start off an album. And as you mentioned, like there's these meanings behind all the songs, and we'll dig into some of those meanings in a bit. But I was gonna say I love the buildup of Among the Living. The first song, it goes almost a minute and a half, like before any vocals start. It's just like slow build up through all these different parts. It just brings the energy up before, quite a ways into the song before you even hear anything. Yeah. Builds that anticipation.
As far as vocals, I meant. But, yep.
So anything else on Among the Living?
What else do we have? I Am the Law is on there too. We didn't really touch on that. That's huge too. Judge Dredd.
Yep.
Based on the comic. Amazing. Drockett, and all that. Judge, Jury, Executioner, it's pretty cool, like lyrical content.
Absolutely. So at number 2, you have 1990s Persistence of Time. This, to me, is your Fair Warning album.
Yeah, you probably think it's dark.
I had a made comment comparing one of your picks to our Van Halen list. And that's how I feel about number 2 being Persistence. Persistence did not make my top 5, but I'm sure you'll have some complaints about my list. So go ahead and defend your number 2 pick.
You probably thought it was too dark and scary, maybe, or I don't know. What was the problem? That's generally what people kind of comment about this one, is that it feels dark and kind of brooding and kind of
vast, it's the dark album.
Whatever that means, or whatever. So, but here you have the classic lineup for their last time together. Although Joey comes back later, little Dan Spitz does not. But then also, this one's kind of feels more mature, but also more contemplative. It has to do with Scott kind of feeling like the band was, kind of not going where he was really wanting it to, especially with Joey's vocals. So he kind of was talking a lot about like urban hell and like society problems and like a desperate struggle within this album. If you listen to the lyrics on this one, the humor of the earlier albums is gone. But I think that's actually kind of cool that it is a little bit kind of darker themed, you could say. And there's also Scotty and thinking about, he thought time was going by too fast and he wasn't, as in control. So that's why you have the theme of time throughout this album. And the other thing that was cool about the tour was they actually spent a lot of their budget building that gigantic clock.
Yeah, and shipping it around.
Like, how big would you say that thing is? Like 20 feet tall or something?
Yeah, it's got to be.
With like the spinning arms and all that, and the skulls on it. It was a pretty cool set piece, but yeah, it obviously cost them a lot of money to haul that thing around. What else can I say about this? Like I said, things were going rotten with Joey. There was a little more, the social consciousness aspect coming in. Talking about like keep it in the family, how kids, they learn to be racist, things like that. They talked about the Holocaust as the belly of the beast. And the one kind of standout thing that's not sort of an angry type of song or whatever, an aggressive song, I guess you could say, was the cover that they did on their Got the Time. Now you have to like that song. I mean,
I love that song. So like if there's one saving grace, like I don't hate this album. I found a good chunk of it is getting a little boring compared to previous stuff that they've done. Like I just kind of lost a little bit of interest, but Got the Time is an incredible cover. And
Frank Bello,
I would beg to argue that the cover is better than the Joe Jackson original. Which is a great song in its own right, but like even like I pay a lot of attention to Frankie's bass playing on that. Yeah, that song is just stellar.
Yep, I was gonna say I think the bass and the drums just sound amazing on this album overall. Yeah. I think they were well recorded and well produced, and they stand out in the mix a little more maybe on this one.
I think that if I think Scott was just discontent or worried about them not progressing enough or whatever. I think if they would have continued the course with Joey, that this would have just been an album. It would have just been a little bit of a dip with a great single. And then you're on to the next album that would have been successful. But there was just this like invisible push to like, I know Scott was really worried about just being like a thrash band. He didn't want to be a thrash band. He wanted to be like, he wanted to be bigger than that, better than that. Not for like fame or anything, but more from like, as we can appreciate an artistic push. Like, and that's where I think that the more in-depth writing, the messages, the stories, they were very, personal. And I think that that was part of it too, is that Joey's singing these personal words and Scott's got the emotions, but he can't sing them. Joey can sing them, but he doesn't have the emotions that Scott has.
Yeah, that was the thing. I mean, with Scott writing all the lyrics, as they get, like you said, as they start getting more personal and maybe not as much about like a Stephen King book or, a David Lynch movie or what have you, them being personal to him, of course, someone else trying to portray that is not going to live up to generally what you expect. Yeah. And it had to be hard, and it's got to be kind of hard too, with Charlie writing most of the music. It's kind of like Charlie's writing the music, Scott's writing the lyrics, you're starting to get, I think things maybe a little mixed up, and yeah, definitely he was feeling that Joey was the problem.
So moving on, my number 2, Spreading the Disease from 1984, which is the first album with the classic era lineup. Frank is now in the mix playing bass. This is your number 5 pick. It is my number 2 pick. To me, it's got that, I don't know. It's kind of like a, maybe like a Ride the Lightning, where it's like, it's not Kill 'Em All anymore, but it's not Master Puppets, or it's not, it's not the Black Album. It's not the fully realized Metallica. They're still evolving. So to me, Spreading the Disease is the classic lineup, but they're not fully materialized maybe to the Among the Living level, which comes 3 years later. But I just love the songs AIR, Lone Justice, Madhouse, Armed and Dangerous, Medusa, Gung Ho. Like these are just classic thrash anthems. And a very big difference between Fistful of Metal. They are now a totally different band.
Yeah, I agree. Or go ahead.
I was just gonna say also the album art. Like this is probably my favorite album cover by Anthrax.
Is that right? Okay. Yeah, we should have been talking about the album art as we were going through these too. But yeah, like you said, I mean, I think, they got the right team together on this one. They were doing things right. There was like 3/5 of them or whatever were brand new on this album. And they pulled together the right energy there, even with Joey kind of coming from not like New York, New York City, but from more like upstate New York.
Yep.
And they got him, I don't know what the word is. They got him like in the right mode for going from almost his classic rock background into singing with the energy and intensity that he does, and that operatic voice coming in on this. Yeah. I mean, it's just, you got to include it because it's just the lineup as it should be. And the energy that was something big coming, kind of that feel.
Absolutely. So your number 3 pick, you have The Sound of White Noise, which is the debut of John Bush. Hit me.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that didn't show up on yours there.
It almost did.
Yeah, I just think, obviously I remember that one coming out and being so excited about checking this out with, what's going on. They got a new singer. What's it going to sound like? And you're talking about, the early 90s. They obviously had to compete with all the grunge going on that was like hitting its peak right here. Let me just find this here. So yeah, I mean, it's more of a different sound. It's not really like a thrash sound so much, I think, but it's just like these heavy grooves and these like really intense things going on with the bass and drums. I didn't think maybe the guitar solos weren't really as good on this one, but I think just like the band in general, with John Bush bringing that passion and that anger that Joey had kind of lost.
Yeah.
I just loved how he sang. It was like a lower register. It was kind of like a little more growly, you might say.
Yeah.
And the fact that John Bush was also helping to write the songs is really cool. Him coming from Armored Saint, and him being a really good songwriter, that Joey wasn't either. So I mean, it's just what Scott was especially, and the other guys were looking for. At the time. So I think they worked really well together as far as writing the lyrics and stuff. They were both like in again, a pretty dark and kind of depressive place, I think, as far as their relationships in life. So they really portrayed that on this album. I mean, every song is pretty much like you're angry at this guy for something. This person was a fake person. I got to get away from that. That kind of feel. Who are they talking about?
There was a lot of that in the 90s.
Yeah, it was very angst. I don't know. Yeah, I just, again, I just remember just blasting that album a lot. So it's just like there's that nostalgia thing for me, which is a big deal for how much you love an album.
I don't know. I would have assumed it would have made my list. Like when I went into this, I assumed it would have made my list. I felt like the addition of John Bush was like when Sammy Hagar joined Van Halen. So he adds more dimension. He can do more. Or like Dio joining Black Sabbath is another example of somebody coming in who has a wider skill. I think that's a pretty good comparison because it's almost like two different bands. You have Anthrax with Joey, and you have the Anthrax with John Bush. I think the difference, though, compared to those other artists I listed, I don't think that John's history is as strong with Anthrax beyond this album. The reason it didn't make the list is because outside of like Potter's Field and Only, I didn't feel like the rest of the album could go up against something like Spreading the Disease. where I like love like the majority of the album. On this album, I didn't love more, more than those two songs. But
Right.
those songs can be heavily weighted as well. They're great. They're great songs.
Yep. Yeah. Only I think was one of the first songs they wrote for it. And it's just, I mean, the drumming, what can
Oh
you say
yeah.
about that drumming? I mean, just barreling along, chugging along at the beginning and throughout the
I was
song, the double kick is just pounding the whole song.
I was impressed to find out how much of the Anthrax music was written by Charlie too, the drummer.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Um,
is kind of weird. You don't hear that ever anywhere else.
no, like riffs and arrangements and all that stuff coming in from your drummer. That's
Hmm.
pretty. That says a lot about his abilities. Um, but I like this album. It just wasn't enough to. It's probably my number 6.
There you go. It's interesting. The song Black Lodge on there, which is based on a little bit based on Twin Peaks. The Black
Yep.
Lodge is that sort of other side on that show. And Angelo, how do you say it? Badalamenti
Yes.
actually played on that song on the song on this album.
Oh wow, I did
It was
not
pretty.
know that.
Yeah, he was part of the composition of the song, and I think he played a guitar even on it, and he played like or he, whatever, put some orchestration in there.
Sure.
So that's pretty sweet. Just seeing if I got any other cool little fun facts here. Yeah, it's funny. Towards the end of that album, I was just re-listening to it for this, and you do start to kind of hear the grunge influence on that album for sure. Like,
Yeah.
and the producer, Dave Jordan, I believe his background was with Alice in Chains and Jane's Addiction, so I think that influence kind of poured into this a little bit. Some of the later songs on the album, especially, I was kind of like listening. I was like, God, that sounds like almost like "Damn the River," "Damn That River" or something off Dirt. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting to
We've
go back
got
and kind of see it again.
a listener commenting that it was a yarling voice,
Oh, okay,
which is
A Yarling,
what they
yes.
call the like Eddie Vedder, Jarl, the Creed, all those bands that ripped off Eddie Vedder. John Bush does have a bit of that Jarl to his voice. Like
Hmm.
they clearly were going for something completely different. So my number 3, I was sticking to true metal. So I stuck with State of Euphoria, which I know the band doesn't hold in very high regard because they kind of consider it to not be a finished album,
Yeah.
Um, it's of course got the Trust cover, Antisocial on there. Um, they hired Mark Dodson to do the production because of his work with Judas Priest and Metal Church. So at this point, they're trying to move kind of out of the thrash, but they're kind of trying to move more into like Judas Priest territory. But it's still thrash metal. And I think that this is one of those situations again where like Antisocial, the Anthrax cover is probably more famous than the Trust version. And I kind
Yeah.
of liken
Yeah.
that to like Quiet Riot and Slade, how they made Slade songs even more popular than the originals.
Yeah. It's one of those where you're like, people are pretty much like, that's a cover. Like what? Like most people wouldn't even realize, I mean,
Well,
I
and
think
when
the
you listen to the
originals.
cover and it's in French too,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. It's like, I guess people in France, probably in Canada, were probably like, oh, this is a cover or whatever. I don't know how that accent goes,
sorry,
but
French listeners. Nate is not affiliated with this program. But I think a lot of the covers come from Johnny Z. Johnny Z, I think he knew that bands got famous from doing covers. So,
mm,
but we were just recently talking about how many covers has Anthrax done. Like every album has a cover or two,
yeah.
or
Yeah. And I don't have a
compilation.
problem with that. I don't mind
Yeah,
covers, as long as they
they
make
do.
it their own, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it either. It's just it's an oddity to see how many covers they've done, and they put them
Yeah.
as full studio tracks. Like Metallica has done a lot of covers, but they did them as B-sides, and then they ended up on like the Garage Days comp or something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, but think about like the other band we talked about, a while back, Van Halen. I mean, look at all the covers that they threw on,
Yeah.
especially Diver Down, which is like half covers. Shit.
So my last little bit, I would just stay on State of Euphoria, which is your number 4 is and Be All End All is like killer track. That's another
Right.
just
The opening cello.
awesome.
Yeah.
So you got it number 4. Anything you want to add to that conversation?
I don't know. I kind of put it on there because that with Among the Living and Persistence of Time, I always listen to those 3 like so much. So to me, it kind of just it goes in with that stuff. It's like you said, it's a solid album, and I mean, it's got all the ingredients of a great Anthrax album as far as the content, and the references to social problems and literary stuff and all that. I don't know what else I would add. It's kind of cool. They had Not Man on the back,
Yeah.
and they were illustrated on the back cover by like the Mad illustrator, whatever that guy's name is. I don't know.
Sure.
So that was kind of cool to, they were having a lot of fun at that time, and I think that's when they were going more into that thing with Not Man, maybe during concerts and like on stage and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like everybody had a mascot at that time.
Yeah, no, that was cool. And unlike
Eddie and Vic Rattlehead, and
unlike those though, they didn't really ever use it on the cover. I mean, it did appear on the back, but
I feel like Not Man didn't like take off like those other ones did. Like maybe it's just because it's like the guy himself isn't as cool as like Vic Rattlehead. Like Vic could fight Eddie. Like that would be a realistic battle. But Not Man, what he's gonna do? Skateboard? He's gonna thrash him.
Well, yeah, he's just this like bulging head. I mean, it's just, but it goes with the style of Anthrax. It's just kind of goofy.
Yeah,
it's not scary. It's just goofy.
So my number 4 pick was probably might have caught some people by surprise. I went with their debut record, which is 1984's Fistful of Metal. I'll definitely recognize that the sound on that album is much different from all future Anthrax albums. It's more raw. It's thrash. It's in your face. It's ultra metal, I would say. And it's like kind of got this like new wave of British heavy metal sound to it. Their singer at the time, Neil Turbin, was like absolutely obsessed with Judas Priest, and they hadn't kind of developed their thing yet. They didn't get like really into like. They didn't get goofy yet. They didn't get their sound. Joey coming in obviously defined that. The cover art is kind of ridiculous because it's like iconic, but also like so terrible. It's got 2 left hands. So whoever drew it, like it's got 2 left hands, which is kind of weird.
And it's got Neil Turbin's glove, his gauntlet coming through. That he actually built. Like they said he would like sit in his apartment and like link these little chains together. I thought it was so badass.
Scott wasn't allowed to wear shorts during this era because he had to wear all his like his chainmail belts and stuff.
Yep.
But I mean, Death
belts.
Rider, Metal Thrashing Mad, Soldiers of Metal, Death from Above. I mean, these are all great song titles and songs. So cheesy metal, but like I love cheesy metal. Like I love just the ridiculous fantasy inspired thrash, So I got a place in my heart for that album.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as like battle charge music, It's like, I mean, they got the song Soldiers of Metal where they're talking about, pounding and tearing the flesh, blasting the cannons, shaking the ground, I mean, I love that stuff. It is very like Judas Priest or Iron Maiden though, isn't it? Like, it's kind of like you can see where it comes from.
Yep.
But yeah, his vocals on there are pretty sweet though. He's got that like, Jim Gillette kind of I think if it wasn't for the personality clashes, I think he would have stayed in the band, but there was just too much of a power struggle and
he thought because he was the singer, he was just there to run that band the whole time. So,
Yep. Damn singers all the time. They got the ego.
I heard the singer from the Recognizers. That guy, whew, talk
No,
about a
he's
prima
cool.
donna.
He's cool.
So let's get to your final pick, which is spreading the disease. I think we've kind of already covered that, but
Yeah.
anything else you want to touch on? I should add, actually, Peter Coriston and illustrator Dave Heffernan were the artists of that album, and it's got that iconic thrash look to it that a lot of albums had.
Yeah, that's right. And they had actually worked with Zeppelin on the Physical Graffiti cover, I guess.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is or maybe maybe it was the sleeve. I just remember the cover of that is like the side of a building, right, with the fire escapes.
Yep.
The Physical Graffiti.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's just the cover. You said that was one of your favorite covers, right? I mean, that's where he's like laying on the gurney he's getting checked for like radiation levels or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Yeah, what else about this one? Yeah, I think he covered it pretty well. I mean, Scott's jumping on the lyrics on this one, and things are coming into the full lineup that everyone loves. I mean,
so
I just
my
put
number
it on there
5
because
pick.
of that. Yeah, go ahead.
My number 5 pick is Worship Music, which came out in 2011 with the reunited lineup. In my opinion, this is the album that should have come out after Persistence of Time. Like, if the band would have made all the right decisions, that would have come out right after Persistence of Time. It's kind of got some of that vibe to it, but also a little bit more modern metal, a little bit more modern production on it. It's the return, though. Joey is back and all is well in the world. It reinvigorated Anthrax. It's a crisp, thrashy, classic Anthrax album. And they had originally recorded this with there was a singer, Dan Nelson, who actually sang on this album. So they had the album done. He recorded all the vocals. And then all of a sudden they announced that he was leaving the tour because he was sick. Basically, they fired him. And nobody knew who this guy was before he joined Anthrax. Nobody knows why he was kicked out of Anthrax. And nobody's ever heard of him again. So it's kind of weird. And I guess kind of serendipitous, because then the Big Four concert happens. Joey comes back into the fold. Joey records all the vocals. And now we have this, instead of having some weird album with some dude, we have a Joey album, which everybody wanted and made Anthrax, a relevant household name again. And, generations of younger metalheads are able to like get into this band with Worship Music as like a great jumping off spot. It's aggressive, it's energetic. And most of all, like it's like really well written. The melody, the hooks, the lyrics, it's just like a total package in my book.
Yeah. I mean, when it came out, like I didn't really listen to it that much, and probably haven't, too much except for lately. But I got to say, like, the more I listen to it, I mean, that thing, I could see that climbing onto the top 5 for me, like, very easily. I mean, it's like you said, it's got the full package. It's got like the cool stuff with like the lyrics is back again on this, like the references. And, there's the song Judas Priest that references the line from J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, where it's like, now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds, So, I mean, it's, cool lines like that, cool stuff where if you like actually want to, learn more about those lyrics and you're looking it up, you're going down this like wormhole of like, research and like what's behind the story behind the lyrics and all that. I mean, I just think that stuff's fun, and Anthrax is like so awesome with that. Yeah. Like making you kind of think about the lyrics and like, what are they talking about? Where does that come from? So yeah, I do really appreciate them, that album as a comeback for them. What did you think of the album after that, the more recent one.
I like that one too. I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
I specifically like the song "Breathing Lightning." That song is like, I liked it and now I love it. Like like I would love to make sure that that's in their set list when I see them live.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're putting out quality music, and I was thinking about this when I was looking at the release dates. You know, Worship Music was 2011, For All Kings was 2016. So we're due for a new Anthrax album coming out of this
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah, I thought I heard somebody like online talking about that they had one possibly coming out this year. So I guess we'll see.
There's
Could
a lot
be.
of downtime during the pandemic that people can write and exchange ideas, and I'm sure people that are used to being out on the road most of the year are probably really antsy right now. So
Hmm.
you
Well,
find a lot more time.
We know Charlie's got a covers album coming out, so that's what he's been up to. Working with people remotely. So, and I think the first song on there is actually a U2 song, so that'll be awesome to hear. Being a U2 fan. Come on now.
Yeah, you enjoy that. I used to like Charlie,
Yeah.
but
No, I think you should like him, and I think he's trying to tell you something here. He's trying to tell you
oh,
what's
okay.
good in the world.
I see how this works.
Anyway,
So yeah, all is right in the world. Anthrax is a band that's relevant again. I think that um, we're about to get into the different eras of Anthrax, and as you'll find out, there was a series of what I would call like bad decisions, along with bad luck, like just things not going their way. But let's start at the very beginning. Anthrax's initial lineup was completed by singer John Connolly and lead guitarist Greg Walls and bassist Paul Kahn. Paul Kahn was briefly replaced by bassist Kenny Kushner before Danny Lilker switched over from guitar to bass. And then Dave Weiss was then replaced early on by Greg D'Angelo, who was recommended to the band by Greg Walls. A lot of random people here. This is a lot of nerding out information, but the point
he
is,
went
a
on to be
ton
in
of
White
people were in
Lion.
this band early on. Like it was like coming out of high school kind of band. Scott Ian's younger brother was even in the band. Jason Rosenfeld temporarily as a vocalist until Scott Ian's former schoolmate Neil Turbin joined in late 1982. So in this early rendition of the band performed their first concert at St. John's Episcopal Church, which is like how a lot of bands get their starts, at little VFW halls, church
Right.
basements. What's some of the weird places that you've played at?
I think I did play at like a veterans hall once. I kind of remember, being just down in this weird like basement. And there was just like, it was a weird crowd too. It was just like a mix of, this is back in the 90s. We were playing stuff, kind of that style.
Yeah.
So it's, kind of like a little bit heavier. And there was just like a weird mix of people like floating through, like older people and younger people, which is kind of cool. But yeah, definitely kind of a weird venue.
I know Jamie Josta recently posted some pictures online because on his podcast, Jamie Josta is the singer of Hatebreed, and he often talks about shows at VFW halls. And a lot of people have been writing in and saying, "What is that? What's a VFW hall?" Veterans of Foreign Wars. They're like, I don't know, what do you call those? Like clubhouses for veterans and such.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a gathering place, to kind of get together and hang out, really.
Sometimes they have bars, sometimes they have stages. A lot of times though, it's just a hall, and you rent the hall for your small wedding or your fish fry or whatever. So he posted pictures of Hatebreed playing these VFW halls because a lot of people have a hard time imagining what it's like for these huge bands to play at these tiny little places. I like definitely cut my teeth playing music at the Shorewood Legion Hall in Shorewood, Wisconsin, where you used to live.
That's right.
But the first Anthrax show, the church show, reminds me of the first festival I ever put on, which was called Chaos Fest in Milwaukee. And I put on a few small shows at this church basement, St. Boniface in Germantown. And I had a kid I went to school with that was hooking me up with the renting out the basement. And I throw this festival. Well, the festival was much bigger than all the previous things I'd ever done. It was like packed out. There's all these people. People started panicking. They wanted to shut the concert down. And I'm telling you, like all the biggest metal and hardcore bands from the Midwest were playing this thing. So you got all these bands from Minneapolis coming down, and a lot of bands before they had blown up yet are playing this festival. And it was one of those scenarios where like it almost all ended before it even started, but somehow we pulled it off. And this kind of started my career as a promoter. I did that festival for multiple years following that. And every year it got bigger and bigger. It eventually was a 2-day fest and stuff like that. But it's just cool to see how even a band like Anthrax had that start, just playing in somebody's church basement. So Neil comes into the band, and then, you know, they're looking for a lead guitarist, and they find a little guy named Danny Spitz.
Little Danny, he's like 5'2", but he's got the attitude of like a 7 foot tall kind of guy or something, which is funny. Scott actually found him working in what was it, like a used instrument, like used guitars kind of store.
Yeah.
He was kind of working behind the counter, and he pretty much asked like Scott, like, "Oh, I heard you guys are looking for a new guitar player. Oh man, I could be the best one you ever had. I could shred all over that, you know." And Scott was like, "I just came in here to buy a guitar, man. I'm not looking for you." But eventually I guess you could say he was just kind of desperate enough to see that Dan had the skill, because he gave him like 2 songs to learn, and like 2 days later he's back and he's like, "I know him. Let me try out for the band." So.
Well, and I didn't know that he was in Overkill. Like before
Right.
he auditioned for Anthrax, Overkill at this time they were a punk band. They had become this metal band wearing like vampire makeup, and I don't know how to describe it other than that. But so he had some experience. I've got some notes here from Scott's book, but when Dan Spitz came to audition, while he was tuning his guitar and getting his gear ready, I warned the rest of the guys about his attitude. He's really arrogant, but if you take it in stride, it's kind of funny.
That's right.
So basically, he comes in there and he like hands his guitar to like one of their friends. Is like, "Here, tune this for me." And Scott calls him the next day and he says, "You want to?" And then Dan interrupts him and he's like, "Yeah, I'll be in your band." Like he just was so arrogant. I mean,
right. The other thing that attracted him to them though was that he had a lot of gear as well from working in a music store.
Yes.
And
yes.
prior to that, Scott had to share some of his cabinets, some of his speaker cabinets with other bandmates, which he hated to do because he had 12, huge cabinets to share. But now when Dan came in, he also had 12. So you can just imagine the back line on these shows. It was starting to actually look like a rock and roll show.
Well, yeah. And Dan was like, "I also have 12 cabinets and they're Wakuin custom 4x12s, and I have 5 guitars and 6 amps."
Yeah.
Yeah. They're so cocky and a sign of things to come.
Yeah, exactly. Little man, big attitude.
Absolutely. So from 1982 to 1984, Neil Turbin's on vocals, Scotty in on rhythm guitar. Dan Spitz had joined on lead guitar. Charlie Benante comes in to replace Greg D'Angelo. Greg D'Angelo, you may know this name. He went on to join White Lion in 1984. So another weird connection where a lot of people who were in Anthrax were either in another band before that or went on to great things to follow. If you want to call White Lion a great thing to follow. But,
I do.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Charlie joining the band?
Yeah. So Charlie, it was kind of a similar situation. Like he heard that they might be looking for somebody, and he pretty much was like, or somebody told them about him. I forget which one it is, but they basically hauled their gear up to like his 5th floor apartment where he had like a huge Gretsch drum set, like pretty much taking up the whole room. So they kind of, I think it was Scott and Dan like went over there.
Yeah.
And they jammed with him, and everyone was comparing like good drummers to the drummer in Accept, where they just had a new song out called Fast as a Shark, I think it was called, right?
Yep.
And so everyone was like, oh, there's no way anyone could play it that fast, play like the double kick and that. And but they were jamming with Charlie and they were loving it. And he was like super fast, like with the beats and the double kick and the, syncopated snare and drum or snare and bass kick. And then they had jammed a couple songs and he was like, oh, I thought you were going to ask me to maybe play Fast as a Shark. And they were like, no way, we wouldn't ask you to do that, man. That's just like, no one can do it. And he was like, here, let's do it. He started playing like the opening, beat for it. And they like just joined in and just jammed it. So they really wanted him in the band. Like Scott was like pursuing him constantly. But at the time, Charlie was just like, I don't know if I want to, because he was a graphic artist and he was like about to go to college. So he wasn't quite sure if he wanted to like go that like pro route, like make it a career. But yeah, they ended up convincing him within like maybe like a couple weeks to get in the band. Like Scott pretty much told him, you are in the band, because he wanted him so bad.
Yeah, Scott and Charlie are actually the only 2 members to appear on every album. Frank Bello joined on bass, replacing Danny Lilker in 1984. Kind of sucks because Danny Lilker really didn't do anything wrong, but their singer Neil was like, it's either me or him. And they couldn't like go without a singer. Like they're trying to go fast. They're trying to do an album a year. They can't go without their lead singer. That would really put them behind. So unfortunately, Danny, who goes on to form a pretty awesome band later, got the cut. But the interesting part was that Frank Bello is actually Charlie Benente's nephew. But he's only 3 years younger. They grew up together because they lived in the same household.
Yeah, Charlie's older sister, she must have been quite a bit older, was Frank's mom. Yeah. Interesting thing about this lineup, just real quick, and that first album, Fistful, the only song, do you know this one, this trivia? What's the only song that Scotty never played on any Anthrax album?
Oh, it's a song that he didn't like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the cover, the Alice Cooper 18.
Oh yeah, 18.
He just could not stand the fact that whoever was the producer or whatever, or maybe it was Johnny Z that wanted that
Johnny
on there.
Z.
Yeah, he just couldn't believe that he wanted that on there because he didn't feel like it fit the other songs, and it really doesn't, No, except for the fact that they probably were like 18 years old at the time. I don't know. But yeah, so Scott Ian does not play on that song. He refused to.
The strategy there was like, just like every other band, like, okay, if we cut this cover single, we're going to blow up. And I think that other songs on that album have far exceeded that cover.
Exactly.
But in 1984, the band turns around and kicks Neil Turbin out of the band because they have just had enough. He thinks he's the boss of everybody. It's kind of like having Ken Hoffman on these podcasts. He just thinks he's the boss. He thinks he's in charge. He tells everybody, and he's always wearing like chainmail cod pieces because he thinks he gets more views on YouTube that way. But Neil Turbin out of the band. Joey joins on lead vocals in 1985. We've got Dan Spitz lead guitar, Scott Ian rhythm guitar, Frank Bello bass, and Charlie Benente on the drums. So this is obviously the classic era. So I think one of my favorite stories about Joey is him joining the band. He comes to audition. He's more like a classic rock guy, but he's recommended, I think, by the studio, like the engineer maybe. So.
Yeah, they were recording in upstate New York at the time, I believe, and so for some reason they were, asking around that area to find a new singer.
So he comes down to the studio and they're hanging out. He looks kind of weird, like, and then he goes and he auditions and he sings. I forget. He sings something by Journey. He sings "Hot Blooded" by Foreigner. Not exactly thrash metal songs. Not exactly what you
Yeah.
would think, but they're pretty
Wasn't
impressed with it.
his shirt was like, was it like a tiger stripe or something?
Yeah, he
Or
had like a tiger striped half shirt, and he had like these weird boots. He had like some chains or something on him, and but they're like impressed. Like they're like, what a goofy dude, but like they're impressed because he can like really sing.
yeah,
He's like measured in his breathing. He can like carry notes. He's got vibrato. These are all
yeah,
things that like how it is coming up in bands. You got guys that can sing, and then you got guys that can like sing.
hmm,
And he was a true singer. So um, they were like, okay, well, let's just like hang out with him, and maybe we'll kind of like figure out what this guy's all about. And they said something to him like, hey, what's we dig you, but like, what's with your clothes? And he was like, oh, well, they told me I was auditioning for a heavy metal band, so I tried to look the part.
yeah, yeah. And I think that was it ended up being kind of one of Scott Ian's problems with him, I guess, was that he was kind of, a fish out of water.
Yeah.
Although he did say he was a fish out of water that learned to breathe out of water, or whatever that means. Because I think he saw
Yeah, I
him as
think
like a
like the first time
soft-spoken
he saw
dude.
like moshing, he was like so confused. But then when you learn how to like control the crowd and pump
Yep.
people up, like Joey's one of the best frontmen for that exact reason. So in 1992, Joey gets kicked out of the band, and you kind of cited some of the reasons. We talked a little bit about Scott's need to like keep evolving and changing. So I think he was just looking for a new sound. And even you look at the picture of the band from that era, they're changing their look, they're changing their style, they're trying to like kind of like morph into the future of metal, or they're trying to get away from that thrash thing still.
Hmm. Their hair got shorter, trimming the hair down and whatever. Charlie and Scott's starting to shave his head more.
Yeah, he's losing it too.
Scott's like,
uh,
the goatee, you see it just, starting to get really big.
Before they land on John Bush, who's the singer of Armored Saint, they had auditioned Mark Asaguedo from Death Angel, Spike Xavier from Mind Over Four. The rest of the lineup's intact, though. They decide on John Bush and get to work and start putting out albums. And how did you feel about the other material outside of Sound of White Noise?
I do not like it. I just don't. I just think it just feels like more of the same to me, like, but not as good as White Noise. I don't know. Nothing really grabs me there. How many more albums did he do? Like two more after Sound of White Noise?
I don't even know. I think
Yeah,
three more. The Threat is
yeah.
Real, Volume 8.
Oh,
We've come
Stomp.
for you all. But irregardless, they keep having bad luck. They're not getting the record label support. They have record labels folding on them. I think they're not used to like not having the fan response that they were used to, because they were on this trajectory, and now they're doing a totally different type of music, and they very quickly alienated their core audience. Like core metalheads were like, "No, I don't want this. You're doing
Hmm.
something else." But I think they were too metal for like the grunge scene, so they weren't really putting out grunge albums. They were
Yeah, and then
somewhere.
and then new metal, comes out, uh, in the late '90s. So they're kind of battling that too.
Yep,
I guess on Volume 8, that was about 1998.
yep. So there, at this time too, at the end of this era, Frank's got one foot out the door. Charlie moves his studio to Chicago. So he wants to be closer to LA where Bush and Scott Ian are. And Frank's like, hell no, I'm not going to Chicago. He joins Helmet during this time, so he's playing bass for Helmet. But he knows that if he quits the band, he gets nothing. So he's not going to quit the band, but he's also not helping things along. So around this time, they decide 2005, they're going to do a reunion with Dan Spitz and Joey Belladonna. I mentioned the Retribution tour with Judas Priest. This tour went horrible for Anthrax. They immediately remembered why specifically Dan Spitz wasn't in the band. They remembered why they didn't really like working with Joey. And it didn't really work out.
Just bad news all around right there.
Yeah, so you got the failed reunion there. So they try to court John Bush, bring John Bush back. He does a few dates, but he now has a family. He's not really interested in doing the band anymore. So the event that really reinvigorated things was in 2010. There was a simulcast Big Four concert from Sofia, Bulgaria. It was the Sonosphere Festival. They called it the Big Four. So for the first time ever, you have Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax all playing together. So this is a pretty big deal because there's a lot of tension and problems throughout the years between certain members of these bands, especially like the Metallica and Megadeth camps. But because of this, they're like, we're going to give it to the fans, right? Rob Caggiano, who was the guitarist prior to the Spitz reunion, comes back. They got Joey back. Everything is going quite well. These bands jam together. They all play Am I Evil together. All the members of all the bands on stage at once, which was a pretty amazing thing to see. I actually went and saw it with my friend Jim and Kevin. We went to the theater and saw this, like, because it was a thing in theaters. It wasn't a home thing.
Yeah, it was for me. I watched it on Blu-ray, but
so this is the lineup in 2010. You got Scott, Frankie, Joey, Charlie, and Rob Caggiano. Rob does the album. He produces worship music. He plays on worship music. And then soon after makes this very odd decision to join a little band called Volbeat instead of being Anthrax, which is something that I cannot condone, but to each their own if you're into that kind of band or whatever. But the good news here is they bring in Jonathan Denaeus, who was the lead guitarist in Shadows Fall. Awesome band from Massachusetts, new wave of American heavy metal band. Just an incredible band. I would definitely check them out. Their cover of Welcome to the Machine is a great cover. And interestingly enough, their drummer, Jason Bittner, is now the drummer in Overkill. So Jonathan is in Anthrax, Bittner is in Overkill. And I really like his style, like especially when you hear the old songs played live. I think he's got much more of a classic metal style, whereas Rob had more of like a modern metal way and tone, and he played. I think the solos are just fire. And they bring it, I should add, the live energy that Anthrax brings. They were always a band that was running all over the stage. But they're still doing that. And I would add that they actually ruined the first leg of the Slayer farewell tour that I went to, because they were the first. Behemoth played first, and that was like a good warm-up. Then Anthrax plays. Anthrax tears the house down. This is an arena. Tears the house down, full energy. They're followed by Lamb of God, who has a humongous stage setup and tons of energy. Slayer hits the stage. They stand in place. They don't move. There's no visuals. It was a little depressing for their final tour to have Anthrax blow them off the stage. So,
yeah, I don't know how they do it, because they're still jumping around and stomping so much, jumping off risers and everything.
Yeah.
At their age, come on. I mean, you're going to blow out a knee or something. It's amazing.
Yeah, the magic of modern science, I guess,
Yep.
So let's dig a little bit into the stories of a fabled band like Anthrax. The first thing that I would like to talk about a little bit about is the relationship of Johnny Z played in Anthrax's forming and getting them to be at the level that they were. Johnny Z most famously discovered Metallica, flew them, or didn't fly them, drove them out across the whole country to New York to record Kill 'Em All. Put them up in the music. What's it called? The music
building.
Yeah, the music building, which is where they met Anthrax. They brought him a little toaster oven and a refrigerator. And you see these two thrash powerhouses become friends at an early stage before either band has exploded. But the significance here is that they kept bringing Johnny Z these cassette tape demos of Anthrax, and he would be very critical of them, like, oh, you need to change this, you need to do this. And Scott kept going back to the drawing board, booting members out of the band, tweaking things, better equipment, always upgrading his guitars. And at one point, Johnny Z plays the Metallica demo for Scott and Danny Lilker. And that was like the epiphany moment. It was like, wow, these guys beat us to the punch. They are playing the style of music we're trying to play. And because of that, like just that little instance of playing that demo, that motivated the band to like become what they are.
Yep. To take it one step further and find the right personnel for the band too, So I think it was right after they recorded the first album, Scott was headed over to England to do promotion and do interviews and things. So he was hanging out in England for quite a bit, and they're good buddies who you just talked about from the music building, and they're huge influence. Metallica was also in the area because they were about to record Ride the Lightning up in like Scandinavia area, and they were supposed to go on tour as an opener, but the tour got canceled because it wasn't selling enough. So that's how we get these guys hanging out in England together. And they got bored one day. So Scott and Cliff, they decided to take off and head downtown to buy a Walkman. Okay, just a simple day, just heading into the tube, waiting for a train. And it's like the middle of winter. These guys are all bundled up and just kind of doing their own thing, just chilling. But then they're approached by two police officers or bobbies or whatever you call them over there.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, they come up to these two long-haired dudes and they're like, we'll make it easy on you if you just admit that you have, illegal substances on you. We'll just make this a quick little easy little thing here. I'll take you in. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? We don't have anything. Meanwhile, though, Scott knows that Cliff, likes to smoke a little weed now and then. So he's starting to get a little nervous, but the cops are like, you guys have something, and you're going to come with us right now. So they basically like arrest them and take them into the they had like a little cop shop set up there in the in the underground system there. So they separate them and they throw Scott in this cell and they strip him down and do a strip search on him for like no reason. He's standing there in like his boxer shorts in this tiny little cell that's got like no heat or anything. So they're separated and he's all worried. He's there for hours and he's starting to think about, well, Cliff, probably might have even had something on him. I'm all worried they're going to find something. Sure enough, they found like a couple little like Tylenol that he had. And so this is crazy. They're like, we're going to take you back to your apartment and search that. Like how does this work? So they yank him out of there and they leave Scott standing there for like another 5 hours. Well, all of a sudden, he's in his head, he's thinking all these bad things, like I'm never going to see my girlfriend again or my family. Like they're going to shut me up in this hole somewhere. He's thinking about any scenario that's just terrible. He thinks he's going to have to like fight his way out of this thing. So finally, though, they come and they bring him into the captain's office, and there Cliff's sitting over there just with a smile on his face, and he's like, "What's going on?" The captain's like, "You guys are actually free to go. We're sorry, it was a big mistake. Obviously you don't have anything, so everything's cool." And Scott has like a fit, and he's just furious. He's just like, how can you guys get away with this? He's like, I'm gonna sue your ass. I'm going to get my lawyer. And he's just like yelling, and Cliff's like tapping him. He's like, dude, let's just get out of here. because they had like busted into the apartment, and at the time, like Kirk Hammett's like there, noodling around practice, and he's like, holy shit. So it ends up, they leave after this whole fiasco, and they're walking down the street, and Cliff's like, dude, I had weed under my mattress in the apartment, and they didn't even look there.
Yeah, the one place you'd think that they would look.
Yeah, like the most obvious place. So it's just kind of a wild, I don't know, like just a strange occurrence.
So when the band was recording Among the Living with Eddie Kramer, you had mentioned Eddie Kramer earlier. He had worked with Zeppelin and Hendrix and Kiss. He did the famous Kiss Alive album.
Yep.
He's known for having like this great like raw live, just huge sound. Like, so they're thinking, okay, if we take our thrash metal and we give it this huge sound, nobody better than Eddie Kramer. He's a legendary producer to come in and give us this sound that we're looking for. So they record the album in Florida, and then they go on to the Bahamas to mix the album. So Eddie takes everything, they record everything, recording goes great. He mixes it, but he basically tried to give it the Mutt Lange Def Leppard production, which was very popular at the time. And Def Leppard's blowing up, and this is like the new production that everybody wants to do. So what does he do? He puts like reverb on everything, which is the exact opposite of what they were looking for. They're looking for this nice, crisp, tight, in-your-face sound that
the raw
Eddie
sound
Kramer is known for. And instead, he gives them this Mutt Lange, and they get in a bunch of arguments over this, and Eddie's like, no, you got to change with the times, and this is where you want to be, and all this stuff. And they fought him, and eventually they ultimately ended up succeeding and maintaining that aggressive, dry sound and fast rhythms that they had on the original recordings, and we all know the album to love. And there was still some reverb here and there, which is what you want, but I'm just glad that they fought that fight, because otherwise that might not have been our number one pick.
Yeah. So I call this one a story of a collaboration that you never knew almost happened, and also a collaboration that you thought happened but didn't. Okay, so it's kind of a two-parter here. So, As you know, Anthrax, these guys were always into rap music as well as metal. These guys weren't one-dimensional like some people. So they were into like stuff like Run DMC and like LL Cool J, Eric B, and Rakim. And so Scott was messing around one time when they had some downtime with his guitar tech, and they started writing their own rap, and sort of in the style of like a rapper, like talking about themselves and hyping themselves. They started writing the "I'm the Man" song with lyrics like, "We're Anthrax and we take no shit. We don't care about writing hits." So they started just writing that like in like a hotel room or wherever, like on the road somewhere. And it's funny because I always think of the "I'm the Man" song, and it always reminded me of like Beastie Boys, right? I mean, obviously.
Yep.
And these guys are both like big time New Yorkers, Beasties and Anthrax. So it was kind of funny. Anthrax actually were friends with these guys because the Beasties were, originally like a punk band, like a music act with instruments and stuff. So they had seen each other out in clubs and things previous to this. And this is before License to Ill came out at all. So they were just about to break big. But the Beasties, they actually asked him, hey, do you guys want to join us on "I'm the Man" and sing on it or rap on it or whatever? And they were like, yeah, we definitely do. But it just, nothing really panned out between them. So that's kind of like just, something that could have been, but like never really panned out. But it's just interesting because I always just tie those two groups together anyway. So I was kind of surprised to kind of learn about that.
Yeah.
And the other thing was they also loved, of course, Public Enemy. Scott used to go down and hang out like at the Def Jam offices and just like talk with guys and hang out. And that's how he met Chuck D.
Yeah.
And then later Scott was like just riffing on some stuff. And he was like, that sounds a lot like Bring the Noise, like part of the horn section. So they went ahead and they pretty much like recorded their own, he and the band, like Anthrax recorded their own version of Bring the Noise with like a heavier sound. and showed it to Chuck D. And the problem was they had already released the song. So it was like, well, you know, if we're going to work on this, it's like rehashing it. So he wasn't really that into it at first, but they did convince him. They were like, okay, we are going to re-record this with, you know, Chuck D and Flavor on the vocals and stuff. But it never happened because Anthrax was on the West Coast and Public Enemy was out on the East Coast, and they just could never work it out. So what you actually hear on the Anthrax version is Charlie and Scott, they actually went in and took like an a cappella version of Bring the Noise that Public Enemy did, and they restitched the vocals into their version. So it sounded like a new version that had been redone, and that's actually what they told people they had done.
That's what I was going to say. They always said that they had them come in the studio.
Yeah.
And even when you listen to it, they kind of stitched it like word by word so that things weren't exactly the same.
Yeah. So that's the one you thought they got together, but it actually never happened. But it turned out to be a huge hit. And I should say that they did tour with Public Enemy eventually. So that was a really cool sort of crossover. Must have been a really interesting concert to have, you know, the band and then the rap side of it.
Yeah, I feel like around that time that started encouraging a lot of groups to go out with like a mix of sound and different types of bands. And I think that's, you know, what leads to a lot of the diverse music that comes after that. Is like, before it was like, oh, you like hip hop, or, oh, you like, you know, this or that. So it started becoming more acceptable to like different genres of music. Not that you could only listen to punk rock or thrash or heavy metal or whatever. So in reading Scott's book, I was seeing about how one of their favorite hotels is the Biltmore Hotel, which is located in Providence, Rhode Island. It's like a classy old place, huge lobby. It's kind of like the Overlook Hotel, pattern rugs and all this kind of stuff. But the interesting part to me about this is every day I either drive by this hotel or walk past this hotel. Like, it's right downtown, right next to my office in downtown Providence. So it's part of the Providence skyline. It's very historic. And they loved to stay at this hotel, which makes sense. They're New York guys. And Providence is kind of like between Boston and New York. But the hotel was built in 1918. It was, the interesting part about this is that it was financed by a well-known Satanist. And this well-known Satanist wanted to spread the good word of Satanism by financing this hotel. And they had chicken coops on the roof so they could do his sacrifices. And they had nude waitresses that were called the Bacchante girls. Okay. So it was like all sorts of weird historic shenanigans. People would attend these bacchanali
or something, I think.
Bacchanalian. Thank you.
Yeah.
So all sorts of famous people would attend these bacchanalian parties. People like Louis Armstrong, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Zelda Fitzgerald. Like, this is the swinging, the roaring 20s. Like, so they're going there, and there's these nude waitresses and all this stuff. And then, you know, fast forward, the Kennedys loved this place because the Kennedys were doing their military training in Rhode Island. So they loved the nude waitresses and crashing at this hotel. So it's got this history to it already. And then on top of it, Anthrax is talking about how much they loved staying at this hotel. All their East Coast friends could come party at the hotel. They would be up to a lot of shenanigans, like having like these water wars. So they would call like a band meeting, and then somebody would show up for the band meeting, and they would just dump buckets of water on them.
Huge ambush.
I think they called them like, did they call them like pirate wars?
Yeah, that was part of it, like a pirate attack. They would like throw like a bandana on their head and like get a big bucket of water or something and attack you in your room and like yell and stuff like pirates, I guess.
Eventually, these antics start getting more and more extreme, and there's bodily fluids involved, and they're upper decking like toilets and stuff like that, and it starts to get really disgusting. Um, and I mean, speaking of disgusting,
Speaking of
you want to
disgusting,
talk a
yeah.
little bit about
This is kind of
our
another
friend Billy Milano?
yeah, this is kind of another two-part story about just sort of a crowd interaction that turns a little disgusting, you might say. Um, so S.O.D was doing a show. I think it was maybe at the L'Amour. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Lamore.
L'Amour, yeah. And so they were playing this show, and every time Billy Milano would turn around, the other guys would notice that somebody was like spitting on him, spitting on his back, like hawking these big loogies and just shooting him right on his back. And every time he'd turn around, like the guy would be gone. So all of a sudden, after this happens, a couple songs, Scott, he sees the guy in the front row and he points it out, or he stops the song and points it out to Billy. And all of a sudden, Billy, he's this big dude, shaved head and just looking like a badass. He just reaches down and grabs this guy just by his neck or something and brings him up on stage and just starts pummeling the guy. And he actually grabs his arm and pretty much like either rips it out of joint or actually breaks it. He just jerks it like that. The guy's like bleeding and crying, like squealing. Billy just like turns to the side and throws him down the stairs. And from there, like the security guys just like literally take him and throw him out the door into the alley. He's never heard from again. So it was like sort of like a lesson to, I mean, if something's going to stop you from spitting on the stage, it's going to be this,
Yeah.
Which you would think until later. Fast forward to Anthrax touring over in England, like maybe a couple of years later. It's the '86 tour, and they open their set with AIR, and immediately they're starting to get showered. The whole band this time is getting showered by these spit blobs shooting up on the stage. So they're like, "What the hell is going on? Like these guys like hate us that much, and they're like spitting at us." But then when they stop between songs, all of a sudden the spitting stopped, and clapping and cheering and yelling like normal, like they loved
Everybody's
it.
excited.
Yeah. So then they start the next song, and here it comes again. It's raining, in their face basically with all the spit. So they didn't know what it was until after the show, they went and talked to one of the English crew members, and he was like, "No, man, like these guys love you. They're just showing how much they love you. It's called gobbing. It's a punk tradition that's going on where that's how they show their appreciation when they love a band."
No way.
I mean, basically
Ugh.
Anthrax is just like, what the hell? Like, we don't want that. Like, I don't actually, Scott was like, I wish they loved me less because I don't like that. And it only happened like one other time. And, because it was kind of dying out already. In Ireland, it happened like one time, and they actually said like, we're going to stop the show if this doesn't stop. And I think they did stop one show. But yeah, lucky for them. This, I can't imagine. They said like this is when they were playing with Metallica. So later on, Cliff got up there and he was doing his bass solo, and they said it looked like a swarm of insects around his head. There were so many flying in. So yeah, luckily that's not like a thing that really goes on anymore.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think
Pretty
it was
nasty.
short-lived too. I feel like there was like a 2 or 3 year period that was a thing, and then it went away.
Yeah. That's so odd. Yeah, it's just crazy.
So Anthrax also is known for putting a lot of references and messages into their lyrical content. Like everything's well thought out. So every time there's a song, it's got it's got some reference to a movie, pop culture, comics, books, or even politics. And I wouldn't consider Anthrax like a political band by any means, like a Rage Against the Machine or something. But I think they're an example of a band that uses their power, which is being a famous rock band, to get across a message, which is very similar to, again, like the hardcore scene, where it was like, I came up being taught, like, if you're on the stage, you better have a message, because we're not here to just be rock stars. Like this is, let's use this for the betterment of our community.
Right.
But, talking about referencing pop culture things, Stephen King has obviously, his work has played a large role in the history of Anthrax. Songs like books, At Pupil, Misery, The Gunslinger inspired A Skeleton in the Closet, Misery Loves Company, and Lone Justice. Obviously, Among the Living, inspired by The Stand, is essential. As a lover of books, give me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, like you said, I just think it's cool that they can introduce people to some of these things if they don't know about it, or if you do know the stories of these books, it's cool to hear about it in a song form. And the same thing with like Judge Dredd. I mean, like, how cool is that like they basically put a soundtrack to the graphic novel. I mean, it was so inspiring to them that they wanted to put that story in a different format.
What I like about the Judge Dredd character too is like, this isn't Spider-Man, this isn't Superman. Like, this is taking a little bit more of an obscure character from a more obscure comic book company, and putting a lot of eyes on it and giving it that attention. And then I always have this association of Judge Dredd and Anthrax. Like,
yeah. And that was before like the movies came out too, like Sylvester Stallone and whatever sequels
Carl
they
Urban,
did for
right?
that.
Didn't he do one too?
Carl Urban, that was a pretty good version, actually. I think they're doing a second one, in fact, with him, maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, those were good, actually.
Anthrax are big nerds, man. I met Charlie actually at San Diego Comic-Con 2 years ago. And this wasn't like a fan experience or anything. Like, I was just literally walking down the aisle, and walking past me is Charlie, and he stopped me and asked me if he could take a photo with me. And I obliged, of course. But
then you found out it was Charlie Benarty. and he took you home.
Yeah, he's the lesser known trombone player. But no, but it was cool because at like San Diego Comic-Con is such a huge event that there's random celebrities walking through the crowds just as attendees. And I mean, I didn't like fanboy out or anything, because the last thing I want to do is punish anybody like this. But the cool thing is he's walking through and nobody even recognizes who this guy is.
Yeah.
And to me, he's like a superhero. To the other nerds that are there with me, and I'm equally nerdy, he's just another nerd like us. So it was cool to like just have like that, 5 seconds to say, "Hey man, I love your work." Get a quick pic, and let him go on enjoying the day.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I forget what was the song that's about they were big fans of John Belushi back in the day.
Yep.
And they wrote a song about how sad they were that he essentially sort of wasted his life with drugs and alcohol and stuff.
Yeah,
and, NFL. Yeah. So basically, yeah, they're saying nice fucking life backwards. And yeah, the song is all about just, how sad that all went down. It was like a life cut short that could have really gone somewhere. So it's kind of their take on just, I don't know what you call it. I guess just talking about, current topics and what they think about them,
Yeah. And like,
of that.
It was like kind of like an anti-drug abuse song. And at this point, they're still pretty young guys. So you see somebody who's also pretty young in their career, John Belushi, and as big fans, how much more, he could have contributed to the world, but instead, because of drug abuse, he's no longer with us. A story that I freaking love is the story behind the song Caught in a Mosh. So you hear Caught in a Mosh, you think, oh, cheesy metal song. Like I said, probably top all-time metal, one of the top metal songs of all time. But it's actually a biographical song about their guitar tech, Artie Ring. So Anthrax is playing at Rainbow Music Hall in Denver, Colorado in '86. And a kid climbed up on stage and messed up Scott Ian's pedal board. So the guitar tech runs out there and to push the kid off stage, and the two got tangled up, and Artie falls into the crowd and gets sucked up by the pit. I mean, just to
Yeah.
see that happen, like, right, you're playing guitar and all of a sudden your guitar tech just disappears.
Yeah. Into
Um,
like a swirling toilet bowl of humanity.
yeah, 1 second Artie was there, the next he was gone, and eventually Artie climbed back on stage. They finished the show and they got in the bus, and the next morning Artie comes crawling out of his bunk, and I guess he could like hardly move. Like he's like all beaten up, and he's holding his back and he's hunched over. And Scott asked him, "Hey man, like what's wrong?" And his response was, "Oh man, I got caught in a mosh." And
Yeah.
right there, that is history in the making. So they
An
write that
idea was
song
born. Yeah.
about our friend Artie's little experience.
That's just great.
That's got to be one of the top songs that makes you want to move too, man.
Yeah. Speaking of top songs, I mean,
Yes.
Indians. I mean, that's a staple song that they're probably never going to stop playing.
Never.
And it's kind of I guess the stimulus for that one was Joey is part Native American, like his mother I think is part Iroquois,
Yep.
or whatever, Iroquois.
Yep.
So they kind of wrote that song about all the abuse that the Native American people have gone through over the years, and things like the Trail of Tears and being take their land taken and put in smaller reservations, and that just excellent song, so powerful. War dance, they yell halfway through, and it just gets the crowd
Powerful.
going. Yeah, that's definitely a song that you are literally gonna just jump in the mosh and start just mosh pit and just start slamming. But it's also got the great message behind it, which is what's great about Anthrax. There's always a little more deeper meaning there.
Yeah, exactly. And another case of that is the song "Who Cares Wins." Anthrax really took on the plight of homelessness on that track. And Joey Belladonna is singing from the perspective of a man who's found himself on the street, seemingly invisible to those around him. And it's just a powerful MTV video. Like they run statistics across the bottom talking about like what percentage of New York City's homeless are men, women, veterans, people that have children, like all this kind of stuff, and just kind of raising awareness and hoping to get people involved to help those people. Like
Yep.
again, a good example of using your band as a tool to help raise awareness and bring change in the world. So in 1989, MTV sponsored a contest in which Anthrax would trash one lucky fan's home. I know you entered this, right, Nate?
I entered it. Yeah, I got second place. So they just like broke one window and that was it. Pretty lame.
How ridiculous. Do you remember this contest?
Yeah, I do remember this contest going on, and I just thought it was. I mean, it's just these guys. The footage of the winning person, they're like jumping out of this Jeep and they're just like running crazy through this house, like just throwing shit around. And there's one scene where who is it? Joey and Scott. Is that Scott? Joey and Scott are grabbing this like lumberjack saw, like the two person saw, chopping the side of the porch. And there's another scene where they're like spray painting the hood of the Jeep. I think they gave
Jeep. They just won.
Yeah, they won at Jeep, and then they went ahead and like spray painted the whole thing. So it's like, I mean, it's just like typical wild Anthrax antics, pretty much.
Yeah, and this contest was so like absurd that the show Married with Children actually in their 18th season, I should say in their 6th season, the 18th episode was called I think Dinner with Anthrax, and the whole concept is that Bud and Kelly trick Alan Pegg to go on vacation in Florida for their 20th anniversary because they won this having dinner with Anthrax, and Anthrax comes over and antics ensue. Definitely a good episode. Ken and I were talking a little bit on our last podcast about how it's just cool anytime you can see your people, your heroes, people you relate to on TV, on regular shows or whatever.
Yeah,
It's like
randomly
all the other
showing
kids you
up.
go to school with are seeing your band Anthrax on their show.
Yeah, that's hilarious. What was it? The 40th anniversary of Among the Living? Is that right on this? They decided to make a graphic novel. That seems about right, or maybe the 30th. Anyway, they decided to do some graphic novel stuff with Among the Living.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. And I think you can actually I think it's still on pre-order. You can still get this stuff. And I actually did pick it up. So that'll be cool. What it is like you can get like this hardcover or soft cover, but it's like illustrated stories, and each one's based on a song from Among the Living. So you're probably going to see, things like Judge Dredd in there and stuff. And yeah, I think it just sounds really cool. There's also some things that, there's like a picture disc album that comes with it. There's a custom Mad Ball based on a zombified Knot Man. So just a really cool package. I think, you get some shirts and some posters and whatnot with it. But the main thing is the graphic novel, and it's got some famous artists I didn't write down, but check it out if you're more interested, I guess.
I think Charlie did some of the art too, right?
Oh yeah, Charlie worked on it a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, it's like a prime example of Anthrax being Anthrax. So not only did they already throw all the references and creativity into the songs when they initially made them, now they're expanding upon that, even further. You
Somebody
hear
at
that?
your door? Dude, someone's knocking at your door there.
Let me get this.
Why don't you, open that? All I see is like static.
Oh, hey there, Ken.
Oh, what the hell?
What's up, fellas?
Who's this here?
Hoffman, Hoff machine friend.
Look who just walked in. I thought it was the pizza delivery guy, but no, not so lucky.
I'm delivering some beefcake to this podcast, man.
I don't know if we can handle this much beefcake on
You needed some life, man. So I'm here. I'm here to bring the pain.
Pump it up.
What's going on?
Turn up the volume.
How you doing, Ken?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. It's warming up in here. My studio is like super hot. I don't have any AC or any vent in this place, so I'm roasting in here right now.
So we're in Providence, Rhode Island, Vero Beach, Florida, and Roseville, California.
Correct.
The trifecta, the three-headed dragon.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
We
got the U.S. covered here, man.
Yep. We need somebody down in Texas, maybe.
Yeah. We need some Texas representation. Texas is the reason.
I'm sure you've been playing along at home here.
I have.
Would be very interested to see what your top 5 picks are here.
Oh. I made them. I made some picks. And you were close, but you weren't correct.
All right, so for our listeners here, I'll read your picks. You got number 5. You got 2011's Worship Music. Number 4, Persistence of Time. Number 3, Sound of White Noise featuring John Bush. Number 2, Among the Living, and your number 1 pick, Spreading the Disease. Yeah, so Ken, what's up? Spreading the Disease, that's the number 1 Anthrax album?
I think it's really easy to pick Among the Living. Probably all Anthrax fans would pick Among the Living as a number 1, and I was going to put it first as well. It's definitely the album that I listen to the most in my history of metal, and my and Anthrax I've been a big fan of Anthrax since the early days of metal for me and the early days for them, and it's certainly the album that I listen to the most. But that's one of the reasons why I did not place it there, because I felt like it was just the obvious and too sexy of a pick. But really, when I went back and really dove into these albums for this show, I really appreciated Spreading the Disease a little bit more than I used to, because it's the first Joey album. It's the first real Anthrax sound album. When you hear AIR like opening that album, like that's the sound. That's the Anthrax sound that was not there on the first album that really sort of establishes the tone. And to me, it just was, that's the quintessential, vibe of Anthrax moving forward. So coming out of the gates with Joey's first album like that, sort of inventing that, giving them that pulse. And really, you guys missed it when you were talking about it earlier. You missed it. My favorite song of all time from Anthrax is Medusa, and it's on this album. And right there, I'm like, that's like the reason why I edged it out. Yeah, Indians is great. Caught in a Mosh is great. Horror of It All is great. I love Among the Living. It is a near perfect thrash album, but they're, Armed and Dangerous, Medusa, Madhouse, ARI, The Enemy. Awesome tracks, man. Madhouse, phenomenal. So awesome. Because it's Joey's first album, because he came in and kind of reinvented that sound and took him to the next level, that's why I'm edging out Among the Living too. That's why I answered it that way.
If Among the Living didn't exist, I would agree with you on all levels there. It's my number 2.
Yeah.
For some reason, Nate has it at number 5. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why Among the Living falls in number 2. You guys discussed it, pretty in depth already. But I mean, classic thrash album. Indians is probably my second favorite Anthrax song of all time. All the politics in there, all the Stephen King references. But that's what I love about Anthrax. Medusa, dude, you got Greek mythology, then you got, you're rolling into King. I'm like, Anthrax, you're my shit. Gorgon. So yeah. I was hooked. I was hooked right away. But then that's why I've got Sound of White Noise as third, because I'm just really starting to get into Anthrax, and then all of a sudden there's a singer change in the 90s. Now, to have a singer change in a big band like that early on is a huge, devastating blow, kind of, So I was so into Anthrax at the time. I'm like, well, I've got to give Sound of White Noise a lot of listen. And I did. And it's a different album. Do I like the John Bush era? Not particularly. But do I like the Sound of White Noise album? Yeah. And I summarize it this way. This is how I got into Dio Sabbath. My buddy said to me, if you take the name of the band away and listen to that, is it a good album? Is the singer and the musicians, is it a good album? So when you take Anthrax, the word Anthrax off, and you listen to Sound of White Noise as a combo of singer and musicians, Sound of White Noise is an awesome album. So is it Anthrax that we knew and loved? Not really, but that doesn't take away from it being an awesome album. The only great song, Room for One More, High Pro Glow, dude. All super singable anthems, man. I was pumping it when I was doing yard work last weekend, getting ready for this, dude. And I was like, dude, this is a good album. So,
that would be my number 6 probably. It doesn't make the top 5, but it's got some shining moments.
I've really just got to have to chalk it up to, it just was the era that I was listening to metal. That was in the mid 90s when, I was an impressionable high school kid, and that album meant a lot because Anthrax meant a lot, and nobody else was changing singers at that time. Yeah. But then after that, I got into Pantera and Tool and Alice in Chains. So Anthrax and John Bush years did not stick with me because all of a sudden I was listening to Anselmo and company, you know what I mean? Basically religiously, but I can't take away the impact of that album.
That's where I'm coming from. I was listening to other things, like John Bush didn't captivate me. It was
I was going to ask Ken, what do you think happened with the next few albums from John Bush then? You said you didn't really listen to him, but why are they just not as good as that one?
Well, I did listen to them. I just didn't get into them. And I think the reasons why I didn't get into them was because now all of a sudden, Vulgar Display of Power basically changed everything. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is what I want to listen to. And I veered real heavy. I went from thrash into sort of that groove and that death crossover, all that kind of stuff. I just got heavier.
Right.
I just think Anthrax was trying to figure itself out a little bit. I think they were deliberately trying to make themselves different and separate themselves from the Joey years, and it just didn't work. And I think when you carry a name like Anthrax and you have some successful albums under your belt like you did, that's a lot to sort of, you got to keep up with yourself. And I don't think they were really able to do it. It doesn't take away from John Bush. He's an awesome singer, you know. I like Armored Saint. I like, I like his vocal style. I think he can.
Yeah.
I think he's got a fantastic. I just think the way he carries his lyrics are amazing. But it's just maybe it's not really Anthrax, and it just happened that way. There's a couple good tracks on the other albums, but not really start to finish. But Sound of White Noise, I felt like was a good start to finish album. Again, if you just separate the talent of the album versus the name that's on the cover. So,
yep.
Well, and by their last album with John Bush, We've Come For You All, they started to try to re-embrace like being a thrash band, being a metal band. And that's when the fans came back.
Yeah.
And I don't know what year that was. That was 2003. So if you think about it, people were either sick of new metal already and they're trying to get back to traditional metal. So Anthrax was kind of in a good position to start putting out traditional metal again. Priest, Maiden, they're starting to come in vogue again post new metal. But I don't think it really came together until Joey came back, and now they can do it all. So you've also got Persistence on your list, which again, I said, other than Got the Time, I thought was kind of a boring album.
Yeah. It's because those are just the albums of a time frame in my life where they're very influential on me. I actually think like Worship Music probably has more catchy tunes on it than Persistence of Time, but Persistence of Time was the first Anthrax tour that I saw. They were on that tour when they opened up for Maiden, No Prayer for the Dying. And that was like the start of the Gulf War. I remember that show very specifically. So I think it's more of a snapshot of how I voted on this, which is really more of an emotional decision as opposed to, tactical talent and, what's the better album. Rating these albums, it's really open to subjectivity on how you define where you put it. And Anthrax is probably more so than any of the other bands that we've rated so far is where I have all these different factors that are putting into there. Persistence of Time is like, maybe I don't know if it's the worst of the Joey years, because I'm not like State of Euphoria to me is like, it's all right. It feels like B tunes to me, but, or B-sides to me, but I do like Persistence of Time. I mean, got the Time is good. Keep It in the Family's got a great opening, riff. But you guys talked about the 20-foot clock that was on stage. It was all memorable. It was a memorable time, so that's why I ranked it fourth. And then Worship Music did a great job of bringing him back into the fold and sort of capturing that old sound again. But they're tighter. They're better musicians. They got more experience. Sometimes when you rekindle that fire, the fire burns a little bit brighter, and I think that's what happened on this album. So it's a pretty good reunion, I think.
Yeah, I think it's always hard to take like Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Like that album is a great album. It's really good, but there's still like this weird divider between like the early era and anything that comes later. Maiden's another example.
Right.
Great albums later, but it's hard to say that anything will compare to those glory years. So no matter how well it's written or produced, I don't think you can re-get there. Every band is,
I mean, this is the second band that we've done. I mean, similar to Maiden, where the original singer left, you have these like bridge singers or bridge singer in this case, and then the original singer comes back. Let's forget about Neil Turbin. Okay. Let's just call it Joey, the original singer.
Yeah.
So John Bush, I think, did a good job of stepping in for Anthrax, better than the other singers in Maiden did, who I'm like, thinking, I can't even think of the names right now. You know, Blaze Bailey. It's like you can't even remember the names. I think it's really hard to be able to go in and fill a position like that when there is such a distinct flavor and sound and look and character and charisma by the front man, you know? So Bush, you know, didn't try to be Belladonna or try to up him. He just tried to bring his own thing, you know?
Sammy Hagar.
But, you know,
it's Sammy Hagar to me.
Yeah. So, like, you know, but it's a
different flavor.
I don't know.
Different genre. Yeah. But, you know, it didn't really bring that like pop side like Hagar did, you know, but if anything, it got, you know, maybe a little more aggressive with John Bush with that lower register of his voice, you know, and the angry lyrics on White Noise.
Well, it was darker too. You know, like the 90s was like a little bit more doom and gloom. You've got these albums were like sort of the anti-grunge albums, but very similar in the sense where like the subject matter is just darker and rainier, you know what I mean? So that's what the Bush era felt like to me, whereas like the 80s, early Anthrax, Joey Belladonna years were like a little more fun. That's where they're running around and they're like capris and their Run DMC shirts and, you know, and they're young kids. But then all of a sudden you get that fame. Now you've got, okay, we've got different personalities. We've got different creative visions. And then all that shit starts to like, you know, muddy the waters as professionals together. And I think that's reflected in the music. And I think that's why Scott Ian, who's always sort of been the backbone of this band, said, we're going to make a deliberate, you know, veer off the Anthrax track here with John and try to come up with a different sound. And so, you know, mission accomplished in that sense, but maybe they should have changed the band name too, you know, but, I think you realize sometimes what works, and Anthrax was Scott Ian, you know, Bello and Charlie, and bringing Joey back in, and that's who Anthrax is.
Interestingly that you say that about changing the name. The record label actually asked them, like, are you sure you guys want to put this out as Anthrax?
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
And they were like, they understood the brand value.
Yeah.
Like, they had to stick with the name because otherwise no one's going to pay you any attention. It always happens. So let's get moving along. Let's talk a little bit about the Anthrax side projects. So I think one of the more higher profile side projects that formed in 2009 would be the Damn Things. This is basically a super group. It was 2 dudes from Anthrax, 2 dudes from Fall Out Boy, bass player from he was from Every Time I Die, and Josh Newton. But what do you guys think of this band?
I didn't care for it. I mean, I gave it a listen, you know. I gave it a listen or two, but I didn't spend too much time with it. I mean, good for Scott Ian to like keep doing some side projects and having fun. I mean, keeping himself interested with whatever, you know, in the downtime from Anthrax, but it didn't catch me in any way.
Yeah, truth be told, I didn't even know about this band until, you know, we started to throw topics and bullet points out for this podcast. Didn't know that. And, you know, and I don't know everything. I feel like, you know, I'm pretty well versed in the metal world though. You know, I know where my shortcomings are. I know like I'm sometimes pocketed in certain niches or eras, but you know, I thought I knew a lot about Anthrax, didn't know about this band at all. So when I listened to it, I was like, it's all right. You know, there's a particular side project of Scott Ian's that, you know, is the Mecca and that's it. So, but this isn't it.
Yeah, I mean, this is much more in the pop rock element.
Yeah, it's very poppy.
I mean, the people tuning into this are going to be people that are into Fall Out Boy, maybe like metalcore bands, hardcore bands, stuff like that. Know their Every Time I Die material. I kind of classified it as like catchy melodic alternative garage rock. The drummer Andy Hurley, he and I actually have a little bit of history. He is from Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. Straight edge dude, played in a bunch of hardcore bands. personally, his band Kill the Slave Master is one of my favorite metal bands of all time. Like they've got 6 Slayer riffs. They were just an awesome band, but very underground, so very limited release. I don't even know if that band's on streaming, but shout out to the Straight Edge Brethren and Milwaukee Hardcore, old school. Another side project is obviously Altitudes and Attitude, which is a newer band, 2019. The two bass players, Frank Bello from Anthrax and the bass player of Megadeth, Dave Ellefson, formed this band. Thoughts?
I'm going to throw it in the same camp, man. Wasn't aware of it, really. It's not often you hear of like the bassists creating side projects unless your name is Les Claypool, you know?
True.
So,
yeah.
Didn't know about it. You know, I like Frank Bello. I think he's like great for Anthrax, but like, is he like the greatest bassist that ever played? You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? I wouldn't even put him in like the top 5 of bassists in the metal world. So, you know, I'm not going to go digging through his catalog of stuff. Would you? Where do you put Bello as a bass player?
I put him pretty high in terms of metal bass players. I wouldn't put him I wouldn't put him at the top of the top.
Right.
I don't think you check out this band because you're a fan of Frank's bass playing.
Right.
I think you check out this band because it's just some new music put out by some musicians in bands you like.
Well, yeah, you hear Anthrax, you hear Megadeth, you're like, okay, I should check it out. But again, I didn't even hear of it. It wasn't on my radar. Maybe that's just because I've just got tunnel vision on and I don't hear a lot of new music. Really, my streams of info right now is kind of like liquid metal is where I get most of my new bands or referrals from friends. So when you drop it on me, then I'm like, all right, I'll check it out, you know?
Nate, how would you describe this band?
I don't know. It's just kind of generic rock. It just kind of sounds like Foo Fighters. I know I had mentioned that to you. You know, it's nothing that's, it doesn't seem to have like a unique sound or anything. But you know, I would just say like I said with the last one, like, I mean, good for these guys for working on this and actually getting to, you know, write their own music for once. I'm sure they sit in the shadows a lot as far as being a songwriter within their main bands, you know. So
most bass players are just under the thumb of the rest of the band. Like they're just pushed down, and they're really the most important member of the band. So I wish it was just all bass, though. I wish they just both played bass the whole time, and that was it. But
I'd like to hear some Spinal Tap, Big Bottom.
I see this more as like a creative outlook. Like you're a rich, famous rock star. Why not make more music and make stuff that's different? Like we're saying we don't like these bands, but it's because we like their main bands. And these things are often far away from their main bands because they're trying to do something different. They got to do that every night.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not saying I don't like them. I'm just saying I don't listen to them.
The stuff you play for your day job, you know, that's not necessarily like all the music you're into. So, you know, why not try some different things, you know?
We talked a little bit about when Joey joined the band, how he, you know, did some Journey covers, Foreigner, stuff like that. Joey actually has his own cover band from Central New York, which is called Chief Bigway. Also pretty new, 2019 to present. I'm actually hoping being in Providence that myself or maybe even you gentlemen can join me and we could actually check out one of these shows. I'm sure it would be a blast to just see him do covers of Black Sabbath and Cream and the Eagles and Rolling Stones. Sounds like fun to me.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that Joey can sing. And like, I mean, if you're gonna audition with Journey and Foreigner, you know you've got pipes. And I think he covered Heaven and Hell in this band. He sent me that link. Sounded great. You know, he's a good music. He's a talented vocalist. He's a good musician. And here he's rocking like the Phil Collins setup where he's vocalist and drummer. That seems like a fun night out at the bar. Like, yeah, let's go out and watch a celebrity cover band. It feels like who are the they play in LA all the time. They get celebrities to come up on stage with them all the time.
Oh,
the Goof Band. Shit.
Oh shit.
Steel Panther.
Steel Panther, exactly. It
Steel
feels
Panther, yeah.
like a serious version of Steel Panther, where like you could see him having his cover band, and then like a guest all of a sudden is going to walk out on stage at some point. You know, probably from like the New York scene. You know, like Dee Snider will walk out on stage and like do vocals with him. You know what I mean? I can very much see sort of like that local music thing happening. I'm totally down for, you know, famous musicians doing covers of other stuff. I think it's killer.
Yep, I'd be all for it. I love the video I saw of it. It looked great.
So the next band I want to cover is I don't know if you would necessarily call this a side project as much as something of a jump off from the band. Nuclear Assault. I'm a huge fan of this band. Thrash crossover. When Frank Bello joined Anthrax, Danny Lilker went on to join or start this band with John Connolly, who is the vocalist of Nuclear Assault. He was the original singer in Anthrax. So you got the original singer in Anthrax. You got Danny Lilker, who played guitar and bass for Anthrax. And they went on to have a pretty successful career, along with a lot of the East Coast bands. Ken, you're probably, you know, pretty well versed with the East Coast scene coming from New Jersey, but Overkill, Whiplash, Toxic, Carnivore, and obviously Anthrax.
Despite being raised in Jersey, I did not know those fun facts of the lineage. I didn't know those guys were the Nuclear Assault guys were originally Anthrax guys. So you still learn shit at 46 years old. You know, that's the best part about metal, man. But I think Nuclear Assault, you know, I've been watching some other metal stuff recently. I think Nuclear Assault's up there in like the OG thrash sound, certainly development on the out of the East Coast. But Anthrax being the number one, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. They're kind of, I feel like they're a little more crossover. There's without Nuclear Assault, though, you don't have the bands like Toxic Holocaust, Municipal Waste, Power Trip. Yeah. They owe a lot to a band like Nuclear Assault. So I would say if you are listening and you've never checked them out, check out Handle with Care. Like that's the album I would say. Yeah. From there, maybe go on to an album like Game Over. But if you like thrash and you like the more like mainstream thrash bands like Anthrax, Metallica, stuff like that, give Nuclear Assault a chance. It's a little higher energy, I would say, a little more raw and in your face. But definitely like the next step if you're trying to like expand upon your palette. And the last band side project is probably the most well-known side project of Anthrax. And I didn't realize how early in the band's career they actually launched S.O.D, Stormtroopers of Death. Ken, you want to kind of take it from here?
Yeah, like you just said, I didn't realize this album came out before Among the Living. I thought it came out after that. But S.O.D, I think it's not underrated because all metal fans know of this album and really was just one album. I mean, they came out with Live at Budokan and there's I think like some new tracks on there, but this is like the album that just came out, S.O.D, Stormtroopers of Death. But the riffs on this album, crush. I had an S.O.D back patch on my denim in high school. The album cover, S.O.D, Stormtroopers of Death, Speak English or Die, which I probably wouldn't wear now, but, you know, in the 90s, you were very rah-rah America, and it was accepted. In fact, when I saw Anthrax come out open up for Maiden during the Gulf War, they started a whole "fuck the Middle East" chant, and you know and Belladonna came out waving a big American flag. Patriotism was that's what it was called then. It was called patriotism. It wasn't called racism. Now, Anthrax will tell you that's all joke. Those lyrics are jokes. I don't buy it. I think it was very rah-rah pro-America at the time, and everybody was against the Middle East at that time. And you know that's kind of that was the state of the union in that era. But I'm digressing a little bit. But the riffs of that album, I mean, to me, S.O.D really is the reason why you have like vulgar display of power. It's like there's a groove to that. They call it really like a hardcore crossover album, and it is a lot of that. But it's also a groove metal album. The riffs on that are like probably some of the best riffs Scott Ian ever wrote. That's what I think, and that's what I told him when I met him at Monster Palooza.
And what did he say?
What'd he say? He just said thanks. I was like kind of fanboying on him, fanboying out on him.
He was like, get away from me.
He was like, "You gonna pay for the autograph, or you just, if not, get out of here." You know, you're holding up the line.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there is a big narrative about it being a big joke, you know, and kind of like painting these extremists because it was so common for, you know, people to sit around and say stuff like screw the Middle East and stuff like that, like that they were almost creating this caricature. And Billy Milano got a lot of flack for that because he's this hardcore dude. So he's got this shaved head and they're like, oh, he's a skinhead. And it's like Nate and I were recently talking about that. There's a big difference between New York hardcore Doc Martin skins, which are working class kids that band together and they're actually kicking the racists out of the concerts. They're kicking the Nazis out of the concerts. They're kicking the drug dealers out of your neighborhood. There's a big difference between that and what people tried to say. So this album didn't help him at all because then they're trying to tell him, you know, paint him in a certain light.
So is that supposed to be from the perspective of like this character, this like Sergeant D?
Sergeant D.
Yeah.
He's supposed to like hate everything, right?
Everybody.
So that's how they kind of get away with it.
Yeah.
Well, so what's your opinion then? What do you think this album is just a statement, and it's not like where does it lie politically then?
I definitely think that it's definitely more in the I think it's in the anti-political correctness like world for sure. So the point was like people get all upset about things, so we're gonna make the most extreme, ridiculous lyrical content. So his whole idea of Scott doodling this character was like, I'm going to create this character that's so evil and hateful. And then we're going to write a bunch of ridiculous songs based around this character. So I think it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. I think it's more about the time than it is about even the people, because viewpoints were just different. Like it was like things were funny that aren't funny now. It's not that people got uptight and that's why it changed, but it was, I think people realized that like these things weren't actually funny. Like, not saying this band isn't funny, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the song Starting Up a Posse. Remember that? It was like, you know, the 7 words, shit, fuck, Satan, death, sex, drugs, rape, you know, just like putting it out there as like, how offensive can this be? You know, what's the most we can do?
That song in particular was, I think, focused towards Tipper Gore, who was the head of the PMRC at the time. So they were clearly making a statement to her. And I would actually say you're probably right. It's probably a little bit in both columns. They're definitely making statements. They're definitely thoughtful, political. They bring awareness to these subjects and saying, hey, we should talk about them. But I keep going back to that concert, man. And Scott Ian very clearly started that fuck the Middle East chant, and they came out waving that flag. And we had just dropped bombs the day before, or the week before. And I will never forget that. I will never forget, because the whole stadium, this was in New Jersey. I saw them at the time. It was the Continental Arena, Vandenberg Arena. It's changed names a bunch of times. I'll never forget the feeling in there. Like, it was, the whole stadium was chanting it, and it did feel patriotic. You know, you didn't realize like kind of what you were saying. 30 years later, you realize what was happening there, you know, and that would not necessarily be, you know, there's a thin line between patriotism and racism now, unfortunately, in this country. And that's another podcast, another discussion. But this album and the topics on this album sort of bridge that and make you think about it. So
think about the way that America operated was, okay, Nazis are evil. Nazis are the enemy. Nazis are the worst people. Then that switches to the Cold War, and it's Soviets are nasty,
Right.
evil, the worst kind of people. And we like glorified that. Like we glorified these villains, in the movies we love, the Indiana Joneses, the James Bonds. We always have this evil villain. And then from the Cold War ends and you switch over to the Middle East.
Right.
And the Middle East are the worst kind of people. They're evil. I think that some of the discovery later was that it's not the people, it's the leaders of those countries.
That's right. That's right.
So
It's a good point.
The leader, the same way it would be like if you took somebody like Donald Trump and you attach like all Americans are Donald Trump. Like that's not exactly fair. I should mention though, I don't think we touched on this, but the members of S.O.D are Scott Ian and Charlie Benante, drummer and rhythm guitarist of Anthrax. They bring Danny Lilker back into the mix, who's in Nuclear Assault. He was in Anthrax, who kind of unjustly got kicked out of Anthrax. And then it's rounded out by Billy Milano, who played bass and sang. And he's like a New York hardcore dude, was a roadie for Anthrax, tough guy. And I mean, Scott said basically this band's dead. Like there's not really much that's going to bring it back. But what I will say another redeeming thing is, so Scott Ian is now playing rhythm guitar in Mr. Bungle. And when Mr. Bungle came together, they would cover Speak English or Die, but they would change the lyrics to Speak Spanish or Die, which again is like is a great way to do it, to put that little twist and
make up for the wrongdoings of the past.
Yeah, and it kind of goes with the political climate of build that wall and all that stuff that's going on in America. So if you're an S.O.D fan, NECA's got your back. They got a Sergeant D action figure fully clothed in 8 inches. So definitely a cool thing to go along with the Iron Maiden Eddie figures that they've done.
Yeah, I was going to say that'd be sweet to have the full lineup of all the mascots, displayed.
Yeah, definitely.
This album, I think, politics aside and what we, sort of opine about all that stuff, this is a great metal riff album. I mean, March of the S.O.D was the theme song for Headbangers Ball, which I'm pretty sure that's how I first got introduced to S.O.D, because once you hear that, you're like, what is this? That is a crushing opening riff.
Yeah.
And there's lots of crushing riffs on this album. And what I like about it is you get that quick, like, punk sensibility where, like, half these songs are like 30 seconds, the longest song is like 2 minutes. So they just throw it in your face super quick. And then you've got the iconic, icon on the album. It's just, that's all metal. That screams 80s, 85 metal. And it's, regardless of what the politics were at the time this album was made, I think it's a classic. It should always go down as like, something that influenced a lot of albums later on. And when I was listening to it again, I heard a lot of Pantera come out of this. I was like, oh, you know what? This has got a lot of groove to it. More groove, and Anthrax brought that groove too. So I really appreciate this album for a lot of reasons.
Well, and it's considered one of the first crossover albums. So this was before Suicidal made the jump from punk to metal, and DRI. I don't think it was on the scene yet. So there's S.O.D, Suicidal, and DRI are the big three that I would say for crossover of bringing that acceptance of punk and metal together. You had talked about meeting Scott, Rhode Island Comic-Con. I met Scott Ian. He actually has his own action figure. It has a little zombie head you can put on him. He autographed that. And in 2012 is the first time I met the band. I met the full band, got the CD autograph. That was the Rockstar Mayhem Festival in Tinley Park, Illinois.
You got that autograph where?
The Rockstar Mayhem Festival at Tinley Park. It was a traveling metal fest, kind of like Ozfest.
What were you, backstage?
No, they did like Rockstar would sponsor like fan signings throughout the day. So I actually remember Whitechapel's playing on the stage right behind me as I'm waiting in line to go meet Anthrax. So it was like a tent, and you just walk through and you got your stuff signed. I got a poster signed, got the CD signed. And I remember at the time I didn't actually like, I had MP3s of this album, so I didn't have a CD. So the day, shout out to Rushmore Records in Milwaukee, small record shop. I went in there the day of the show. I was like, yo, I need an Anthrax CD. It wasn't even wrapped. He got it from like the back in the
house
back.
copy.
So it might have been his own copy, like
It's all
that he
scratched
sold
up.
me. But shout out to Dan at Rushmore Records for hooking me up so that I could get the CD autographed. But
I met Anthrax at a record store also. Back then, it seemed like bands used to do more promotions and tour and do signings when they had new record releases. So one of the things I forgot to mention was Attack of the Killer Bees, definitely honorable mention in the top 5. I probably would insert it in somewhere in like 2.5, number 3, actually, because, because of the PE song on there. And I love the Pipeline cover. That was heavy into the rotation. But when that released in 91, Anthrax went to Tower Records in Jersey, the whole band, and they sat out on a table. And the line, all the fans aligned the building and waited there. And I bought the cassette. And then some dude who had like drawn a sketch, printed these out. Can you see that? And got like, he drew this and gave it to all the other fans in line. And I got the whole band to sign it. And I just remember that being a sophomore in high school when that came out and going and seeing Anthrax and getting to shake all their hands. I remember Dan Spitz, for some reason, being the nicest. That's kind of what I remembered from that day.
Cool.
It was like 95 degrees and hot and humid Jersey. And then I had to go back and pump gas later in the afternoon at my job at Ramapo Exxon. But Anthrax, man, bringing up these are just old fun memories. And that's one of that was, I think, my first celebrity. That was my first autograph. And I think really the first time I ever met any of my heroes in person. And I'm pretty sure that I was starstruck and wasn't really able to say much other than stick my hand out,
So cool. All right, boys, it's time for part 2 of this episode's The Ranking. We're going to be ranking the big 4 of thrash metal. Folks know this is Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax. It's not in that order per se, but we're going to see how we would all rank those top 4 bands, because those are the consensus top 4 thrash bands of all time. So again, we'll go through the comparisons. Here's the rankings. All different picks. So I guess I will go through these lists and then we can discuss and debate. So in number 4, Nate has Slayer. Number 3, Metallica. Number 2, Anthrax. And Nate, your number 1 pick is Megadeth. Ken, your number 4 is Megadeth. Your number 3 is Anthrax. Number 2 is Slayer. And number 1 pick, Metallica. And my list is number 4, Slayer. Number 3, Anthrax. Number 2, Megadeth. And my number 1 pick is also Metallica. So Ken and I have Metallica. Nate, you have Megadeth as your number 1 pick. Nate, why not Metallica?
Because Dave Mustaine created Metallica. That's why. Dave Mustaine is the father of thrash metal, dude. He's the one that made Metallica what they are. So he's got to be top level.
He made Metallica what they are.
Yep. Yeah, because come on, man. He wrote all the riffs.
Demos that he wrote for them. He made them what they are.
Yeah, he wrote all the stuff that got him on the scene. He got him in Johnny Z's hand out there, man.
Okay.
And then he went on. Of course, they influenced Anthrax. So there's and they went on to influence Slayer. So that's why they're at the top. And not to mention, I mean, yeah, we know the band is pretty much Dave Mustaine, but that's because he can write the riffs. He can like shred solos over them, and he can sing, and he can, pick the right guys to play with. So I don't know. Makes sense to me.
Nate's got Metallica at number 3. So Ken, set the record straight. Why is Metallica the number 1 thrash band of all time?
Look, this could go on for hours and probably will in some way or some shape or form in the future, I'd imagine. But there's 2 ways you can look at this. You can look at it from a career perspective and an accomplishment perspective, and clearly Metallica is the head of the pack in both of those things. Or you can look at it from just who influenced me personally and what did I listen to the most from middle school through college. And that was clearly Metallica. I mean, there was not a party that I went to in the 90s where Master of Puppets or Ride the Lightning or Kill 'Em All or Injustice for All were being played at the loudest volume you could play it. Everyone in the party was singing along, crushing beers, having a great time. It was Metallica at all times. And in Jersey, we tailgated at those shows, and they were the best concerts. So you've got the emotional, personal reasons, but then also career accolades, accomplishments. Metallica set the bar. They did everything first. They played on Antarctica, for God's sakes. You know what I mean? Come on. Number 1. It's easy. That's an easy question. Boom. Done. Game over. Next.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Let me tell you why Ken is right and why Metallica is number 1. Metallica are the greatest heavy metal band of all time, not just thrash. They are the greatest heavy metal band to ever exist. They have the greatest riffs, the greatest rhythm guitar parts. Kirk Hammett plays the greatest thrash solos out of any of the lead guitarists on this list. Sorry, Nate. Metallica's ballads are even heavy. The ballads from the early albums are heavy. They're metal. They didn't lose any credibility when they did those ballads. The visuals, the logo, the album covers, the look of the band members, except Lars. Load and Reload, that wasn't a bad band. But
I like them. Yeah, I like them.
But I don't consider Reload. I don't consider that when I talk about my Metallica. I think they're more listenable than Megadeth. Or Load and Reload are more listenable than the bad Megadeth albums or the bad Anthrax albums. So if you're going to weigh the bad albums, I think Metallica has the better of the bad albums. To me, it's the first 5 albums. It's everything Kill 'Em All through the Black Album. I love the Black Album. Death Magnetic is the return to form for the band. But I think Hardwire to Self-Destruct is a much better album. It's a great album. Like, it's just a singles album. There's a lot of singles on it. And when I talk about the greatest heavy metal band of all time, the Black Album is what brought heavy metal to the masses. Like that, Black Sabbath might have created heavy metal, but Metallica is what made metal a household name. They're undeniable at this point. Booyah.
Boom. The only thing I don't agree with that statement is like the best
at number
solos.
2. So.
Okay, talking over each other. Ken, what did you say?
So the only thing I don't agree with in that statement is like the best solos, but this isn't a question of who's the most talented band. I think Kurt Hammett's, I love his solos. I love all their music. I love their riffs. Is Mustaine technically a better guitarist? Probably, than anybody on this list. Probably. Doesn't make his band the best band. So I just want to put that caveat out there.
All right. Best lead singer then.
So we'll go in reverse order now. My number 2 pick is Megadeth. I don't disagree with the things you said about Megadeth, Nate, as them being an incredible band. It's honestly, though, kind of hard for me to choose between Megadeth and Anthrax. This whole list is top tier bands. Like, there's tough. Not a band on this list. I think Megadeth has the uniqueness. Their writing, they're much more melodic in a like orchestral sense. Like if you look at the format of writing of Megadeth, they don't really have like an A-B bridge, C kind of format. He will write like a magnus opus that is like from the start to the end. And even the lyrics often don't repeat, especially in the early material. He was so motivated by getting kicked out of Metallica that he wanted to be the best at everything. So whether it was lyrics or riffs or solos or speed, so motivated. As you said, Dave Mustaine's voice is unlike anyone else. Like you can't, there's nobody that sounds like him. Same thing. I would say probably the first 5 Megadeth albums are awesome. Maybe the first 7 albums. And then they went to a bad place. Risk, all that kind of stuff. I thought they came back to form with Endgame. And they've been pretty solid since Endgame with their material. I personally liked the Chris Broderick era Megadeth with him on guitar. But I'm digging Kiko. I'm digging the current lineup. But I like the lineup before the current lineup a lot, actually. But of all these bands, though, this is the band with the rotating lineup that somehow he's done it with a rotating lineup.
He's a mastermind. He knows who to pick that's going to be the best fit.
Or a dictator.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I could see it. I could see that.
A band? Is that a band then, or is that just one dude creating a sound and making everybody fit into his system?
You could argue that, I'm sure, but
I mean, you could though also argue that Dave Ellefson is just as important, like in terms of the not maybe like the songwriting, but in terms of lineup and consistency.
Yeah.
I know he was gone for a minute there, but he was also gone during the worst years. So who's smart there? Like, I guess. So let's move on to your number 2, Ken. You got Slayer.
Mm-hmm. Again, most of my decisions for these ones have to be emotionally based. But, when you talk about Slayer, you don't say Slayer, you say fucking Slayer, with that passion. That's the level that the fan brings. Consistency from every album, you know what I mean? There's Dead Skin Mask is like the ballad, you know what I mean? So there is no ballads. It's just an onslaught throughout their entire career. But when you talk about some of the greatest metal riffs that were ever written, and maybe one of the greatest albums ever for the genre, Rain and Blood, it just hits different, Metallica, and then Slayer, you know what I mean? Like Slayer punched you right in the face, and you just got up again and you jump right back in the pit. And it's just, there was just a unique brotherhood. You see somebody with a Slayer shirt on, assuming it's not a Kardashian, you know what I mean? There's like an instant brotherhood you have with that person because they know, like you don't typically like.
There's a video of you, Ken, actually, that's circulating around the internet about people wearing Slayer t-shirts.
I do repeat topics a lot, but I think that really what it is. But then you do add in the drumming of Dave Lombardo, takes it to another level from a technical place. He's considered one of the top drummers in the world, just in drumming in general. So that brings it to another level. But Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman and the licks that they wrote, dude, they will live forever. And every metal band that came after Slayer says Slayer influenced them. Any seriously heavy band was influenced by Slayer. There's no doubt about it. And really everybody on this list, but Slayer,
I will agree that Slayer's impact to heavy music is bigger than any of the other bands, like in terms of impact for heavy things like black metal bands, death metal bands. None of that happens without Slayer.
That's right.
So Nate, you've got Anthrax. So all 3 of us have different picks for number 2.
Yeah. Before we get to that, I have a question for you guys. Okay. So you were just talking about Slayer. Now, what do you guys think about Anthrax using the pentagram on the last few album covers with the A integrated in it? Do you guys think do you think that fits their image though? Like because they never used that in the early years,
I don't like it. They're not an evil band.
I think Slayer and Anthrax use it differently. all of it's lost its luster. Back in the day, Motley Crue used to be a scary band, you know?
Right.
So and that's why I think we loved Slayer. Slayer had an aura about them. Anthrax never had that aura because they were always like, not, dun, 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 not, you know, playing Hava Nagila, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they didn't have that, like, they weren't scary. Anthrax can use the pentagram now, because the pentagram's no longer scary, you know, with the aura and the mystique is gone with social media and, you know, Danzig memes with him feeding his kittens and shit. You know what I mean? It's like the evil of metal is gone. So Anthrax just does a good job of branding. And the Anthrax logo is great. Anthrax has always used imagery and iconography, I think, probably better than Slayer and Megadeth did. Metallica's branding was always good with Puss Head and everything else. But I think it's great. I think the mashup with the pentagram and Anthrax, fine. But it's a different thing than when Slayer used it. But Slayer used it because they had the aura of evil, you know, back then. So it was a different pentagram.
Yeah. I mean, now, I think graphically, it looks super cool. I mean, how it works.
I agree.
You know, without modifying the A, it just like fit right in there, which is amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
But, you know, it almost would have worked better if they could have done like the anarchy symbol or something with the A. It kind of fits their image better. So I don't know. It was just something I was thinking about, because we didn't really talk nearly enough probably on the cover art of all these, you know, albums we just talked about. So I picked Anthrax as number 2 for a lot of the reasons we already discussed earlier. I mean, they brought this like fun energy to the stage that a lot of bands, you know, maybe are more, you know, maybe like Slayer, you know, they have the image that they just kind of stick with, and they're pretty much not moving around a whole lot for the most part on stage. They're kind of just rocking out and headbanging, whatever, which is great. But Anthrax kind of has that energy, and like, you know, how they're dressed too. Not a lot of bands were doing that like zero image kind of look, like just walking off the street, jumping on stage.
Yeah.
So, and actually I kind of, you know, these 2 and 3 for me are so close. Like they can day to day like change actually between Metallica and Anthrax. So at the last second, I kind of just said, Baxter, let's put number 2 as Anthrax. I don't know. It's an Anthrax show. Kind of made sense.
He just wanted to piss people off.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be tough, you know, a little tough to deal with here.
Contrarian.
I mean, Metallica as number 1 is like an easy, you know, anyone would do that. So
kind of like putting Among the Living first.
Yeah, exactly.
Ken, you and I have Anthrax as number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't Anthrax go higher than number 3? Why didn't it go over Metallica and Slayer?
I think for the same reason that we like them. That's the reason why they fall to 3, is because they're just a little too fun and a little too goofy. And metal, Anthrax was the first. Give them a lot of credit. Anthrax was like the first band to make it goofy, but metal's not really goofy, you know. Not in '86 when these albums were coming out and melting faces, you know. And I'm the man, Hava Nagila. That's funny, but you know, and it does bring some brevity to the scene, and it loosens it up. And kudos to those guys. But when you rank metal, not, you know, fun, it's a different. It just drops it as a result, I think, you know.
No smiling.
But I appreciate everything that they did, because it is a great show, and it is a great energy, and it's great music, and it did create a lot of different styles after that. Anthrax said, look, you can have crossover with rap. You don't have to be so doom and gloom and so Satan-y all the time. You know, you can have fun and just be yourself. If you like Run DMC, wear a shirt. Who cares? You know, if you like wearing capris on stage, wear capris on stage. You know, do what you want to do. And I think Anthrax is above Megadeth because of those reasons. Megadeth to me, I like Megadeth. I don't love Megadeth. I don't know why. It just was, somebody's got to come in fourth, man. You know what I mean? It's just the way that the cards were drawn.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say about my number 4 too. Then,
yeah,
basically, you know, that I like them, but do I listen to them as much as the 3 above them? You know, no. For me, no. I mean,
Yeah, it's a lot about, like you said, Ken, like your personal emotion that goes attached to these bands.
Yeah.
I love all these bands. I listen to all these bands on a regular basis and have for many years. And I picked Anthrax because to me, Metallica and Megadeth were more like they were just more like when it comes to writing, melody, all these things. I thought they were just on another level above Anthrax. So that's why I put Anthrax after Megadeth. I think though, like Anthrax is also though like the most relatable band to me because you picture yourself hanging out with those guys.
Sure.
You don't picture hanging out with Kerry King per se,
Right.
because Tom Araya is not smiling, being serious. I mean, now he smiles. He's smiling grandpa on stage.
Right.
But like
right.
back in the day, it was all serious all the time. And like, yeah, your music you listen to can be serious, but like in a relatability, these guys were more like the hardcore scene that I came from, the guys that I hung out with, having a message, having fun. And just they just have like a lot of positive energy. You go to an Anthrax show, Joey's gonna get you so pumped up, whether you're in the seat or you're in the mosh pit. The energy is contagious. It's positive energy. And that's the best version of the band. I know they've tried to like go down the dark path and write dark music, but you know that their character as themselves is all the albums probably before Persistence and picking it back up with worship music.
Anthrax certainly comes across as genuine, but that actually brings a good point to mind. Like, I think maybe Megadeth falls where they do for me because there always seems to be an air of like spite in everything that he writes and the look on his face. You know what I mean? Like he's still so
That's
vocally.
Like Nate Fehlauer is like
he's still angry about getting kicked out of the band. Great that it fueled your career. Good.
You got to
let it go, bro. You know what I mean? Like, didn't he come out at like one of these shows and like basically cry to James about it on one of these sort of like, open-hearted attempts at, I forget what it was.
Some kind of monster.
Metallica invited everybody on stage in San Francisco.
The documentary, some kind of monster.
The documentary, you know what I mean? So I think he's been carrying that bullshit with him for so long that it sort of poisoned him a little bit. And it maybe poisoned my opinion of him as well and the band a little bit. Because use spite and anger, but sometimes, dude, but not for your whole life, man. You can't live your life like that.
Yeah, speaking of hanging out with people,
it's heavy here now, guys.
He seems like a guy who would be tough to hang out with. Or even harder to work for, as like you said, an employee that he hires to play guitar. He does seem like, he's an asshole. I mean,
I think he seems like he's struggles to be happy. Like he's got all this fame and success and writes like I said, he wrote these like beautiful orchestral songs with all these layers, but he still thinks it's not as good as his peers. And clearly when somebody like Nate Fehlauer is putting you as the #1 thrash band of all time, you gotta that's gotta be worth something to recognize though, that people do love your band. You are awesome. You are in the top 4. You're not the 5th greatest thrash band. You're not the 6th greatest thrash band. You're in the top 4.
I think actually, Ryan, I think that he's bitter that he's not recognized as the #1 band, even though he considers himself the #1 musician. He carries that air around with him, like that he is the best talent in the room, and he probably is the best talent in the room. The best talent, the best team doesn't always win the Super Bowl, dude. You know what I mean? That's
Correct.
just the way that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to have a mixture of chemistry. You got to have... Metallica at the height were Alcoholica because they looked like they were fun. They were having fun, man. Like they went out there and they were crushing it. And Mustaine's just always just had this sort of like this grudge. And maybe that's just always, I've been aware of it. And that's kind of why I voted him as is. But, dude, you could ask this to a million metalheads and you're going to get you know, a million or whatever the math would turn out. Everybody would have a 4 thing.
The
But
maximum.
the reality is, if you said what are their top 4, these are still going to be the top 4.
So Nate, you got Metallica at number 3. What puts them below Megadeth and Anthrax in your book?
I mean, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I think they're all really close. I mean, I'm a huge Metallica fan. I've listened to them forever. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just happened to be the order they fall in. It's not like I think of them as like low on the totem pole or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm just trying to be difficult and different and putting them at number 3. I don't know.
What about Slayer at number 4?
It's kind of just like, I love Slayer. I love the image and everything that they have. But to me, I just don't, like I said, I don't listen to them that often. I mean, they don't like grab me like the top 3 there. That's just, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like the singing style that Tom has. I'm just really more of a melodic kind of.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to ask you, Nate. Are you like a heavy metal fan or not really?
Not as much as you guys, I would say. Yeah.
That's probably why it ranks. So I'm actually surprised that you have Slayer as number 4, Ryan, and not higher up on the list.
Well, so aside from Metallica, they've definitely got the greatest impact in metal. The speed, the evil imagery, the lyrics, they created that thing. And, their sound is distinct. I would say Slayer's sound is as distinct as Black Sabbath's sound is distinct. Like bands worship those riffs. They play those style of riffs. When you hear a Slayer riff, it's a Slayer riff. And they're also, I would credit them as being the most consistent of the big 4.
For sure.
So from the first record to the last record, Slayer has been the most consistent. They did have like that one record that was kind of new metal-y in the middle. I wouldn't exactly call it a new metal record, but they were definitely influenced by the things around them. They slowed it down. They tuned down. They did that whole thing. But
what, God Hates Us All?
No, I think the record before that it was, I forget. Either way, I personally am a Dave Lombardo Slayer fan.
Yeah,
I am not a fan of any of the records. Well, I enjoy all Slayer. I should back up. I enjoy all Slayer, but I like the Lombardo records.
Sure.
Even Christ Illusion and War Painted Blood. Those are great albums. And why? Because they have the Lombardo drumming. I like Paul Bostaff. He just had great work. He's done great work with Testament, but Lombardo has some sort of organic vibe to him that no other drummers have, which makes him a perfect fit to be in Suicidal Tendencies right now. Like, he's got more energy than kids that are half his age. He's just got something special about his drumming ability. So maybe it's just a coincidence that I love all those albums, but I think there's a big difference between the albums he's on and the albums that Bostaff's on.
Is that enough to drop him to number 4 here?
The only reason that I put him at number 4, though, is it's more of a personal taste thing. What am I more likely to put on? I'm more likely to put on Metallica, Megadeth, or Anthrax. I like very heavy music, as you know. But that doesn't mean that I put the heaviest band on top of all these bands, because we're talking about the big 4 of thrash. We're not talking about the big 4 of the heaviest bands I love to listen to.
Okay.
So, if I'm going to listen to death metal, I'm going to put on like Jungle Rod or Gruesome or something like that, which are 10 times as heavy as Slayer, not thrash bands.
Mm-hmm.
Different vibe. Meshuggah, something, that's a different genre. Again, I would never deny the importance of Slayer or how fun and exciting it is to see Slayer. But I kind of put like Metallica and Megadeth, I put them kind of in the camp of like Led Zeppelin to me, like in the style of writing. That might be a really weird comparison to make when we're talking about thrash metal, but Slayer's a different animal. It's a different thing. much bigger impact than Anthrax and Megadeth. You could have Metallica and Slayer, and those two bands are responsible for the majority of bands in existence. Now, to your point, Nate, is Metallica without Dave Mustaine writing songs for Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning? Probably not.
Who knows? Yeah,
But
who knows?
we're not ranking Dave Mustaine. We're ranking Megadeth versus Metallica. And actually, Metallica is Dave Mustaine. Like, that material is Metallica material.
That's right.
Because he
had
was
to
a
create
member
two
of that
bands.
band.
I mean, look at that.
If Metallica wrote one album and that was it, or if Kill 'Em All was the best album, then I would say, okay, Mustaine had more to do with the creation of Metallica. But
yeah, but
look,
that's the album or whatever, the demos that got them the attention, you know? Who knows?
But you don't talk about any of these other guitarists that have, like, how many revolving members of Anthrax were in there? How many members of Maiden were in there? How many, you know what I mean? There's revolving doors all the time, dude. Megadeth,
Yeah.
Mustaine was just the loudest. That's all, dude. And he just became the most famous afterwards. That's all.
Yeah. But he was actually kind of the front man of the early Metallica too, you know? So he kind of, that's what I'm saying. He kind of created that image and that.
So, but I would beg to differ that if Mustaine didn't get kicked out of the band, Hetfield would never have become James Hetfield, the frontman of Metallica.
Yeah, that's true.
Because he would have been overshadowed. And I also think that Kirk Hammett is more sparingly with his riffs. Like, I think Dave almost puts too much into it. It's like, just because Satriani can play everything.
Yeah, technical guitar porn.
Yeah,
is Satriani the greatest?
He's a little
of all
bit of a show off, you know. He's not afraid to show off up there.
I think we got the greatest gift because we got two bands.
Yeah, I do. Agree
if he doesn't get kicked out, we don't have Megadeth, and I love Megadeth. So,
yep.
I'm a big fan. So any closing statements as we accept that my list is the definitive list?
You guys brought me in at the end because you know I'm right. So let's just leave it at that.
Okay. We'll just say okay and nod a little bit. Yeah.
The loudest is always the brightest.
So let's wrap this up. Let's talk about Anthrax and why. What is the legacy of Anthrax? What is their impact on the world? Why do we love this band so much? Why is this band in the top 4? Like, Nate, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
I think we love the versatility that Anthrax had. They were able to write so many different songs, like within the thrash kind of range, you know, like not only lyrically, but you know, the fact that he can, you know, talking about Scott Ian can go and create these side groups, you know, S.O.D. or whatever that, you know, or working with Public Enemy and not just going down like one lane. I think that's something that they pass on to a lot of people that try to venture a little bit beyond their norm.
Ken?
Well, their legacy is rooted in a couple things. One, they established the East Coast metal sound. So coming out in the early 80s with that, you know, I don't know if you guys talked about it earlier, but, you know, there was a time when, like, I think Metallica was sleeping on the floor at Anthrax's place. You know what I mean? So There was the bridge, East Coast, West Coast was coming together, and it was Anthrax and Metallica. So that's a big part of the legacy when you're starting to bring those sounds together and creating what is now the genre of thrash. But those were the East Coast. That was the cornerstone of the East Coast. So that's their first legacy. Second legacy is they created that first crossover with rap that eventually became nu metal, whether they want to be credited with it or not, which I'm sure they'll take it. But, you know, you had Aerosmith and Run DMC, and then you had Anthrax and Public Enemy. You know, those were like the first two big collaborations between two distinct sounds. And then the third one, it just sort of occurred to me when we were talking about it, is Anthrax let metal be fun. Anthrax let you be you, and it took some of that serious like death overtone out of it, which is what really metal was at the time. And they said, you know what, you can do whatever the hell you want, and you can still make crushing music. You can still make groovy music. You can still have a fun time. That's their legacy.
Absolutely. I mean, they brought their own flavor to the scene. It's kind of cool, like you said, the East Coast thing. They brought their thing in. And of the big four, they're the only East Coast band of there. And it's not that there wasn't for lack of trying from other East Coast thrash bands. They just never hit that level. Murder in the Front Row, that documentary Nate and I were talking at the beginning of the episode, really puts a focus on why all those bands came out of California and was the genesis of this genre, kind of like Seattle for the grunge scene. Yeah. It just happened to be this mecca of this genre of music. And they've embraced their East Coast roots throughout this whole thing. I think everybody needs their band. Like everybody needs a band that they can relate to, a member that they can relate to, lyrics that they can relate to, content, stuff like that. And I think Anthrax adds that. So maybe if Slayer and the pentagrams and the evil wasn't your thing, or the eyeliner and the hair of Motley Crue wasn't your thing, maybe Anthrax is your thing. And I think it's important that we give that to everybody, that they can find their thing, because as you guys know, the metal scene is this big mixture of different types of people coming from different backgrounds, genders, races, all this stuff coming for the same commonality, which is metal. But that doesn't mean that Nate's not going to love Megadeth over the other bands, or Ken and I aren't going to pick Metallica, whatever. Everybody needs their band that they can rep, their flag that they can wear. And like I said earlier, I think just this was the most relatable of the big four. These seem like our kind of people. They seem like they could be on here on this podcast with us, talking about the exact same stuff that we're talking about. Or honestly, they could be on our John Carpenter's The Thing podcast, nerding out about that stuff. Because why? Because there are people. So
yeah, for sure.
I don't know. Where do you guys think they go from here?
Look, if our heroes still make music, then I'm still gonna listen to it. I'm gonna still go see them. Until they're too old or I'm too old, or a combination of the both, then that's where it falls. Will it be better than the heyday? I don't think it ever gets better than the first time you listen to those albums when you're an impressionable youth. I just don't think, even if you find a new band right now and you really like it, you're like, like Gojira, for instance, is a band that I found within the last 5 years or whatever. Love them. You know what I mean? That's like my favorite new band that I've discovered. New meaning new to me. But is it going to be as impactful to the things that happened to me when I was listening to it as a 16-year-old? Probably not, because I was molding so much of myself. So yes. Is Anthrax with their new content, new material, going to be as good as Anthrax when they were cranking out new stuff when I was 16? No. But as you mature, you appreciate things, and I have an appreciation of art, and I have appreciation for people who create art. So if they're going to continue to create art that I like, then I'm going to continue to go and listen to it and see it. So,
Nate, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything they come out with, I'm always going to be interested in checking it out. I mean, these days you have access to like any song ever created, at your fingertips. So, it is a matter of, it's not going to most likely be something that you concentrate on, as much as like Ken said you do when you're a kid. You get whatever, you go down and you buy your favorite album and you spend all your money on it. You're going to listen to the shit out of that thing and like basically, melt that thing in your player. You don't do that today. There's a new album comes up by your favorite band. Well, you listen to like the first 2 tracks, and if you don't get, if that doesn't catch your attention, you're just going to be like, well, what else, what else can I do on my, through Spotify or whatever. So, I'll always check it out. And I hope it's great,
Newer bands, I feel like their albums might stick with me right away. Older bands that I've known and loved, I usually give it one spin, and then it kind of just gets to the back of the shelf. What I find is I struggle because I'll make a top 10 list every year of my top 10 albums. Well, an album that came out this year, all of a sudden I become obsessed with it 2 or 3 years from now.
Right.
So like For All Kings, I didn't listen to it much when it came out. I listened to it like once. And then in preparation for this podcast, I just kept going back to that record because I'm like, oh man, this is really good. And then I get to the end of the year and I'm like, oh, my record of the year was For All Kings. And then I'm like, oh wait, that came out 5 years ago.
Right.
So
Yep.
it's time for our final segment of the podcast, Final Word. This is a game of rapid word association based on this week's topic, Anthrax. Our guests will be taking turns for a total of 10 topics each. The response to each topic should be a simple and short answer of the first thing that pops in their head. Nate, since you've played this before, I'll start with you. Are you ready?
Sure, yeah.
Number 1, Joey.
I'm going to say running to the front of the stage, black hair billowing around him.
Ken, number 1, Among.
I'm just the chant. Among, follow me or die.
Number 2, Nate, Spreading.
Whoa.
That
easy.
rash on your
Easy.
arm.
Full.
Is it the first thing that comes? Spreading. I don't know, man. The disease. Spreading the anthrax disease, man.
There you go. Number 2, Ken, Bellow.
Bellow. That's me. Like when I wake up in the morning for my coffee, I'm like bellowing for my coffee.
Number 3, Nate, Johnny Z.
Johnny Z. Lucky man, I guess, is what I'd say about him.
Is he lucky or are we lucky?
We both are, all of us.
Ken, number 3, War.
Unstoppable! That's hard. I can't hit those notes, dude.
Wrong band.
I know, but that's just what word association. We just talked about the big 4, dude. That's just, you know.
All right, number 4, Nate,
no.
Danny.
What is it, Danny?
Danny.
Little man, big attitude. Little Danny Spitz.
Number 4, Ken, Not.
There was this pizza joint in college that made these great garlic knots. You get like 8 for $1, dude. I fucking ate the shit out of those. I love garlic knots.
Number 5, Nate, Meatloaf.
I would do anything for you. Wait, how does it go? But not that. Oh shit.
I would do anything for love.
Or is that
Anything for love?
Brian Adams? I don't know.
Well, Scotty Ian married to his daughter, right? Is that?
Bad Out of Hell. How about that? Bad Out of Hell.
Yeah.
He's Scott's father-in-law. Ken, number 5, Sergeant D.
Sergeant D. That's what I call my junk. I'm like, you ready for Sergeant D tonight, baby?
All right, moving on. Ken's done. Number 6, Scotty Ian.
The man with the beard.
Number 6, Ken, Horror.
Horror. Wow. Stephen King.
Number 7, Nate, Judge Dredd.
Drockett, I say.
Number 7, Ken, Persistence.
Well, I don't know. Just how you have to live your life.
This is turning into a therapy session for
It
Ken.
is. It always does, dude. You know, I
Number
gotta get a lot
8.
of shit off my chest.
Number 8, Nate, Dimebag.
I will say, oh boy.
Happy 420.
There you go. 420. Yeah.
I was actually surprised to learn how much Dimebag played on Anthrax albums.
Yeah. Yeah, played
Number
some
8,
solos.
Ken, Yankee Stadium.
Dude, Derek Jeter.
Come on, man.
Come on, dude. You're talking
Come
to a
on.
Jersey boy, man. What do you
Number
expect?
9, Charlie.
Charlie. Let's see. Charlie's Angels.
Dude. All right, Farrah Fawcett or Jacqueline Smith?
Oh, Jacqueline. Come on.
Definitely. Good answer.
Yeah.
All right, number 9, Ken, John Bush.
John Bush. Voiceovers. Did you know that John Bush has a distinguished voiceover career?
No.
Go into YouTube and do John Bush voiceovers, and you will hear John Bush of Armored Saint and Anthrax doing like Burger King commercials. I shit you not.
Nice.
Fun fact.
Wow. Number 10, Nate, this is your final word. Thrash.
Thrash. Metal thrashing mad.
Number 10, Ken, bring the noise.
Bass, how low can you go?
I never get sick of that theme song. All right, folks, before we get out of here, Ken, what's going on with Sculpable? Anything?
Yeah, dude. I just finished my new baseball, my base skull prototype. It's taken me quite a while to get this one mocked up. Lots of sculpting, like 5 months worth of prep work. I'm sort of happy with the final result. Really, the paint is what I still have to work with, but I'm going to start molding these next, I think, so I can.
I really like that one. I do not like baseball, but I like that skull.
It was a labor of love, man. I've had the vision for a while, just like I had the vision for the helmet for a while. It just takes a long time to execute it to, the quality that you want out of yourself, So, and my next thing is I'm trying to build. Well, I will eventually build a website to sell these now that Etsy's gone, and having a little bit more of a formal e-commerce platform rather than just having strangers DM me and send me money through Venmo. But I still have a lot of like manufacturing stuff I got to do with this, make a mold, and get the casts going and stuff like that. So, but I'm pretty excited with where I'm at today versus where I was last month.
Well, I'm glad that you bring up online shops because Collect and Destroy happens to have an online shop.
Yes, it does.
Shop.collectxdestroy.com. So that's our official web store. You can buy toys, collectibles, whatnot, and maybe someday even some of the art by Nate Fehlauer and the sculptures by Ken Hoffman.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can work that out. And if you go there right now, you enter podcast 15. Again, podcast 15 on the shop, you get 15% off all of your orders. So remember, this episode was streamed live on YouTube. So it's on there from now until forever. And the audio version comes out next Monday. It's going to be on it's as with every episode, all podcast platforms. So stick your headphones in, listen to the sweet and savory voices of Nate Fehlauer, Ken Hoffman. Nate, Ken, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being part of this. I'm looking forward to the other big three, doing all 4 of these episodes. So this is just the start of a long string. We'll work on some other podcasts in between here.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having
putting me in the chat here, guys. That was a lot of fun.
Yep. Good talking to you, Ken.
Everyone stay safe out there, and we'll catch you for our next episode. Ken and I are going to be doing a very special double feature episode on Jean-Claude Van Damme, JCVD, double feature, Bloodsport, Kickboxer.
Sick.
Thank you, and good night.